I'm a security guard at Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. It seems that it is not impossible. You are not allowed to insult our blood race and Victor. Selena raised another gun and pointed it at Luckian. Point after hearing what Luckian said as one of Victor's jihadis, Selena did not shoot him directly and rewarded him with a volley of silver bullets. The reason was that Scene was there, so she was restraining herself. Point seeing that Selena did not believe him, Luckian was not angry, but just smiled, revealing a mouthful of blood and slowly recovering gum. Scene put away his foot on Luckian, walked to Selena, and pressed down her gun, signaling her to stay calm. Anyway, everything is under control now, and Luckian can't fly with wings. Selena thought about Scene's powerful strength and took a deep breath. What evidence do you have to prove what you said? Selena is not a brainless person. She can actually feel that what Luckian said is not groundless. The reason why she doesn't believe it is just that she doesn't want to believe it, because in her heart, Victor has always been like a father. After she lost all her relatives in her childhood, Victor had always treated her like his own daughter, so she reacted so strongly when she heard Luckian's words about how Victor treated his own daughter. Evidence? I'm the evidence. Maybe you haven't seen me, the Death Walker, but you must have heard my name. My name is Luckian. When Selena heard this name, the blue color of her pupils deepened instantly, and her heart was trembling. Point Luckian, a name that vampires fear, the first werewolf who can change his form freely, the leader of the werewolf tribe. Point, but he died hundreds of years ago, died at the hands of Craven, whom Selena hated the most. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Luckian is dead. Selena strongly denied Luckian's words. Oh, who said that? Craven? Luckian laughed sarcastically, looking at this famous, but always kept in the dark Death Walker. Another name hit Selena's heart. Point, he knew Craven. Hearing Luckian's tone, Selena was shocked. If the Luckian in front of her was really Luckian, then this was a scam that had been carefully planned for hundreds of years ago. Craven personally killed the werewolf leader Luckian, and then the Death Walker hunted down the remaining leaderless werewolves for hundreds of years. In these hundreds of years, countless werewolves have died, and once their vampire clan thought that werewolves were on the verge of extinction. Point, it was not until Selena discovered the many werewolves gathered in the underground passage that she realized something was wrong. Point now, coupled with Luckian's words, it seems that you have figured it out. Luckian saw Selena's unpredictable expression and knew that she understood. Point, taking a few steps forward, Selena pressed the cold muzzle of the gun against Luckian's head. You are not Luckian at all. Seeing that Selena was still deceiving herself, Luckian looked at Scene on the side. Put away the gun first, Selena. Scene said softly. Point, Selena looked back at Scene. If there was anyone she could trust now, it was only Victor and Scene, whom she regarded as her father. She didn't know why she felt that Scene could be trusted. Maybe it was because Scene didn't belong to any of their vampires or werewolves, and his powerful strength didn't need to play any conspiracy at all. Killing him is easy, but what about after killing him? If what he said is true, then the problem in your tribe may be very big. Anyway, he can't run away now. Bring him to that Victor. Won't everything be clear? Scene gave a calm suggestion. Point, after what happened with Nisha, Scene found the best way to solve the vampire problem. Push a leader of his own. Point, after all, after so many years of development, the number of vampires is large. It's not difficult to kill them, but it's troublesome. Point, Selena heard that Scene didn't respect Victor very much, but she didn't show any dissatisfaction. Victor is sleeping now. Although the awakening ceremony will be held soon to transfer power, the next person in power is not Victor yet. Selena explained. This is also simple. Can't we just wake him up by force? Selena couldn't help but widen her beautiful blue eyes when she heard Scene's violent solution. Point, however, Selena really started to think about Scene's solution. It seems that it is not impossible. Seeing this, Luckian finally confirmed that his previous inference was correct. Although the unknown mysterious man in front of him was acting with Selena, the Deathwalker, it was obvious that he didn't have much affection for vampires, and from the strength shown by this man in various relaxed tones, even a top vampire like Victor was not taken seriously by him. Although he is the current leader of the wolf tribe. In fact, in Luckian's heart, his real purpose has always been only to kill Victor to avenge his wife Sonia, to combine the blood of werewolves and vampires again. Originally, he was planning to achieve his goal by conducting experiments on Mike, but now with Scene's sudden appearance, he felt that things might not need to be so troublesome. Let's take a step back. Even if Scene's path doesn't work, as long as he doesn't die, he can restart his original plan. I can go and confront Victor face to face, and then you'll know whether what I said is true or false. Luckian encouraged Selena's wavering heart, and at the same time, gave Scene a friendly smile, but with his mouth full of blood and messy teeth. This smile looked a bit weird. Okay, if you tell lies, you know what will happen to you then, Selena said coldly, trying to threaten Luckian to admit that he was lying, but Luckian was not afraid. What? About me? Mike asked cautiously. Seeing that the three of them had almost discussed it, and it was estimated that they would not fight again, Mike felt that his life was likely to be saved. You'd better not run around, Selena warned him, and then walked out with Scene and Luckian. In the vampire castle, Craven was entertaining the messenger sent by Elder Emilia to take the lead. His gloomy expression showed his inner depression. He had planned to take the position of Selena's male companion in front of everyone, but Selena actually ran away. This made Craven, who always thought highly of himself, unable to accept it. He leaned on the soft sofa and was too lazy to cater to Emilia's messenger's high talk about the future. But soon someone came to report that Selena was back and brought two strangers, two men. Hearing this news, Craven's jealousy was about to overflow. He got up angrily and planned to see which kid dared to snatch a woman from him. He came to the gate of the castle with big strides and saw the person getting off the car at a glance. Craven's pupils shrank immediately and his whole body began to tremble. Shit. Chapter 77 Playing with Real Flowers. Originally, Craven was shocked to see Scene getting off the car first. He didn't expect Selena to bring back a man who could beat him to pieces in every aspect, but this guy didn't seem to be a vampire. Then Craven saw the person he probably didn't want to see the most in his life, Luckian, who he said he killed with his own hands, holding the car door and smiling at him strangely. What? Did you see a ghost? Selena rarely saw Craven in such an ugly state and immediately mocked him. By the time Craven reacted, Selena had already taken Scene and Luckian into the castle. Shit. That's a werewolf, and the strongest, fiercest and most cunning one. Although he didn't know why Luckian came to their vampire territory, Craven now had the idea of running away. But where could he run to? Even his hidden allies were taken to the vampire castle, and Craven could only bite the bullet and follow in. Scene looked around curiously at everything in the castle. Well, I have to say that these vampires are all dressed very fancy. Suspenders, one pieces, transparent linings, some even wore hollow lace and came out with nothing inside. They really played fancy. Many female vampires in the hall who were dressed hotly had discovered Scene's human identity. Regardless of whether he was of the same race or not, his sunny and handsome face and heroic and upright figure simply made the female vampires drool. However, due to Selena's fame, no one dared to come forward to chat with her. Everyone thought that Scene was brought back by Selena to enjoy. On the other hand, Luckian was in a more miserable state. He didn't pay much attention to hygiene to begin with, and he was beaten by Scene before. Now he looked as miserable as a dying homeless man. These self-proclaimed noble vampires all looked at him with disgust. Luckian sneered at these useless people who only knew how to indulge in pleasures. They were just as good as his werewolf subordinates who were full of violence. It seemed that even without Scene's appearance, his plan would be perfectly successful. Led by Selena, they entered the underground of the castle. Scene could clearly see that there were 3 exquisite coffins buried upside down in the underground, covered by many traps. 2 of them were mummies, and the other was an empty coffin. I have a question that I have wanted to ask for a long time, Selena suddenly spoke, and Selena who was leading the way in front, had to look back and look at him obediently. If this master was not served well, once the strange big knife was pulled out, Selena felt that everyone in the castle would die. Wouldn't it be very uncomfortable for a vampire to sleep upside down? Selena blinked her ice blue eyes twice and tilted her head. She didn't understand what scene was talking about. What was uncomfortable? If it's a man, it might be a little better. If it's a woman, it's okay if it's smaller. If it's too big, won't it pull down? Scene added point. Luckian understood immediately after hearing this. He stared at Scene with a pair of wolf eyes. Big brother? Are you so divergent in your thinking? What time is it now? Why are you asking this? Seeing the part where Scene's eyes moved down and focused, Selena, who looked confused, finally reacted. Her fair skin was instantly covered with pink. She rolled her eyes and glared at Scene, then turned her head proudly and continued to lead the way. Selena's charming manner just now made Scene's anger rush down, and he suddenly felt that the wolf dog beside him was a bit annoying. Craven finally prepared himself mentally and followed up and saw Selena's eyes full of love for Scene. Oh no. Do you hear the sound of snowflakes fluttering? Scene asked Luckian. It's raining outside, not snowing. Luckian shook his head to show that I really can't keep up with your pace, boss. First, you left without permission against my orders, and now you're back to my house with 2 unidentified people. What on earth do you want to do? Craven stopped Selena in front of the basement. When Luckian heard the word unidentified in Craven's words, his face was full of playful expressions, so that Craven didn't dare to look at him. Your house? Are you mistaken? This is Victor's house. Selena looked at Craven, who questioned him with an unhappy face, and retorted without hesitation. Then, what on earth are you going to do now? Craven was choked. I'm going to see Victor. I have something important to communicate with him. Craven understood in an instant that Selena wanted to wake up Victor without following the rules. How could this work? If Victor woke up and saw Luckian, wouldn't he be dead? Faced with the threat to his life, Craven immediately decided to strike first, force Luckian to reveal his werewolf identity, and then take down these people in the name of justice, and then slowly take action. Enough. You know that Marcus will be awakened soon, and it is not your job to awaken Victor. Take her down, and these 2 guys of unknown origin. Craven said righteously. Before Selena came back, she thought that Craven would stop him, but for Victor, and for their blood clan, Selena was willing to bear such a crime. Seeing that several of Craven's followers were about to come forward to touch him, Scene took out the 3-pointed double-edged knife. With a thump, the 3-pointed two-edged sword stood on the marble floor tiles and emitted a brilliant golden red brilliance. All the vampires were immediately forced into the corner and huddled together, not even daring to look directly at it. Scene walked to Selena and reached out to touch her head. Selena, who was also huddled together, came to her senses, as if she had walked through death. She instantly could not feel the pressure from the 3-pointed two-edged sword. Pulling Scene's outstretched hand, Selena stood up from the ground. Although it was not the first time that she was so embarrassed in front of Scene, she still felt a little embarrassed, and her cheeks flushed. The big sword in Scene's hand no longer shone brightly, but it still had a strong suppression on all the vampires, except Selena. Selena grabbed Craven, who was about to wet his pants, and walked into the sleeping room of the elders. Scene watched Selena squat down and operate in the center of the ring with the letter back V carved on it. The exquisite metal ring immediately split apart, and an exquisite coffin slowly rose from the ground. The withered corpse in the coffin, which looked like a piece of wood, swelled up little by little under Selena's blood. Because it would take some time to awaken, Scene asked Selena to find someone to take him to see the ancient books collected by their tribe. Give it to me. Selena opened her blue eyes wide and looked at the strange big knife that Scene handed over. She was a little scared and a little curious, like a child seeing a new toy. Help me hold it. Hearing Scene's words of trust, Selena's eyes were full of tenderness, and she stretched out her hand with some fear the moment her white and slender fingers touched the 3-pointed double-edged knife. Selena trembled unconsciously. Not long ago, the restraint from this big knife was still vivid in her mind. Now she was stroking the somewhat cold blade, looking at Scene's back as he left the basement, feeling the slight tremor of the three-pointed double-edged knife in her hand, and Selena suddenly smiled for the first time in a long time. Craven, with weak legs, watched this scene bitterly, howling miserably in his heart. No. Chapter 78 Confidence shines. Scene smacked his lips as he flipped through the dusty tome. These vampires are really shameless, recording themselves as so glorious in the tome. Luckian next to him also spat with disdain. He was one of the witnesses of part of the history of vampires, and he knew clearly what the real image of vampires was like. Scene also found that the records of Selena's vampire clan about their origins were indeed very vague, unlike the records in Nyssa's tome. The tome of Nyssa's clan recorded that their origins were that their ancestors received a gift from the ancient gods through the mysterious power in the Dark God book, which enabled them to transform into a noble vampire clan. The so-called ancient god was the Horned Scythian. Selena's record was very vague. Scene roughly classified it, and it was similar to the story Luckian told before. The only detailed record was the source of the vampire, which was the elder Marcus, one of the sons of Alexander Corvinus. It seems that these two vampires are not of the same origin. Their appearance came from two different forces. One was born through the dark power of Scythian, and the other came from the so-called bloodline. No wonder they have some differences in weaknesses. Just after Scene sorted it out, someone came to ask him soon, saying that Victor had awakened, and Scene took Luckian to the underground. Before Scene came in, Selena had obviously told Victor everything. Although Victor had Selena's memory in his mind, after sucking Selena's blood, because Selena was not an elder, those pictures were always intermittent. However, with Selena's narration, Victor still understood the whole picture. Scene and Luckian felt Victor's gaze as soon as they entered the door. He was more concerned about distinguishing Luckian's appearance. After all, so much time had passed, and he had just woken up from a deep sleep, so he was still a little confused. You dirty wolf cub. Victor panted and stared at Luckian, pointing with trembling fingers. It was obvious that he had recognized Luckian. Craven collapsed on the ground. Now everything was over. The only thing he could hope for was that this hidden ally would have a little conscience and not tell about their collusion. Maybe he could save his life. How? Can you still be alive? Then you have to ask your good servant. Luckian laughed. Victor immediately looked at Craven on the ground after hearing this. Master, I don't know either. I did kill him at that time. Feeling Victor's death gaze, Craven immediately lay down at Victor's feet and tried to quibble. Although he had known that Craven was weak, Luckian still laughed with some disdain and then continued, you didn't kill me at the beginning. You knelt on the ground and begged me to let you go and even proposed the idea of cooperation between the two of us. You are talking nonsense. Craven panicked when he saw that Luckian had directly exposed him. Oh, how else do you explain all this? When Victor saw Craven's look, he knew that the truth of the year was almost the same as what Luckian said. You disappoint me so much, Craven. Cheating the superiors and colluding with the werewolves. It seems that you miss the taste of sunshine, Victor said angrily. He didn't expect that the person he trusted so much was actually a cowardly, treacherous rat. Seeing that he was sentenced to death by Victor, the panicked Craven suddenly looked at Hen, but he immediately thought of another way to get out. What do I miss? I'm not like you who has to go out at night to suck the blood of living people. Craven looked at the sanctimonious Victor sarcastically. Shut up. Victor suddenly screamed like a rabbit whose tail was stepped on, but unfortunately Craven didn't listen to him. Craven turned to look at Selena. Do you think your relatives were killed by werewolves? Selena frowned and looked at him. What are you talking about? I'm saying that Victor, your good father and our good leader, was craving for sweet human blood in the middle of the night, so he ran to a harmonious human family. Originally, he was going to suck the whole family dry, but unfortunately, he saw a little girl who looked like his deceased daughter, so this crazy murderer felt compassion and adopted this poor girl. He raised her as his own daughter and gave her eternal life. Am I right, my master? Craven looked at Victor with sarcasm. If Victor was not still in a weak state, he would have rushed over and torn Craven's mouth. Is what he said true? Selena stared at Victor in a daze, tears in her eyes, and her face was full of disbelief. Victor pondered for a moment and simply said, yes. But I also gave you a precious gift, your eternal life, didn't I? Hearing Victor admit it himself, Selena felt like the sky had fallen on her. With a clang, the three-pointed double-edged sword in her hand fell to the marble floor. Craven rushed towards the three-pointed double-edged sword with quick eyes and hands. The feeling of being suppressed just now made him know the power of this sword. He believed that, as long as he mastered this sword, he could restrain all vampires, and even Victor could not stop him. Standing up with the three-pointed double-edged sword in hand, Craven looked at everyone present with a sinister smile. Ha ha ha. Now, my rules are rules. Selena, who came back to her senses, looked at Scene apologetically. She didn't expect that Craven would take advantage of her momentary distraction. You cheap guy. Victor also knew the power of the sword through Selena's memory, not to mention that he couldn't exert his strength at all now. I have had enough of your high-handed and domineering attitude for so long. During the time you were asleep, I finally felt the feeling of being in power. Since you want to kill me now, don't blame me for taking the initiative. Craven rushed towards Victor with the knife raised. Selena, save me. Victor was still calling for his beloved adopted daughter. Unfortunately, Selena just stood there and looked at him coldly without any action. Clang. Victor's withered body, which had not yet recovered after being beheaded, instantly caught fire and was burned to ashes. Craven held up the three-pointed double-edged sword. He now felt that he was destined to be with him. Such a situation had made him turn defeat into victory. Looking at Selena with a smug look on his face, Craven still did not give up his covetousness for the Moonlight Goddess. Selena, stand beside me. Craven gave the order confidently. Selena ignored him at all, but looked at Zio affectionately. Craven was immediately jealous beyond recognition. Why am I so strong, and you still look at that man? Craven looked at Scene with a crooked mouth and squinting eyes. As long as he killed Scene, Selena would understand that he, Craven, was her true destination. Confidently holding up Scene's three-pointed double-edged sword, Craven slashed at Scene as Luckian and Selena looked at him like a fool. Chapter 79. 100% bare-handed catching of a blade. Craven obviously didn't think about why Luckian would always follow Scene. It was such a good opportunity just now, whether it was to attack or escape, but Luckian never dared to leave Scene. Craven only thought of the three-pointed two-edged sword that he had been controlled by Scene before. He thought that, as long as he took down the leadership of the vampires, he could easily deal with Luckian. He never counted Scene. Ding. A huge sound of metal clashing sounded, and Craven looked at Scene in confusion as he easily blocked the powerful downward slash of the three-pointed two-edged sword. Or empty-handed. Use my sword to chop me. Scene looked playful. Selena and Luckian next to him also looked at him with pitiful expressions, which made Craven feel like a clown. He finally understood why Luckian followed Selena to the castle and was so well behaved. Scene kicked Craven, who was still in shock, and then stretched out his hand, and the three-pointed double-edged sword automatically flew back to his hand. He looked at Craven, who was so arrogant just now but now lying there like a dead dog, as if he was watching a joke. Whose rules are they now? Hearing Scene's question, thinking of the arrogant words he had just said, Craven's toes were twisted together in embarrassment. Then he looked at Selena pleadingly like Victor. He felt that, although he was a little too much sometimes, at least he had always been sincere to Selena. Seeing that he had been in love with her for so long, he hoped that Selena could help him speak. Selena ignored the look Craven cast over her. Victor, who she once regarded as a king and father, became the murderer who killed her whole family. This sudden change made Selena feel discouraged. Fortunately, Victor is dead now, and her great revenge has been avenged. She raised her head and looked at Scene. Thinking of the agreement between her and him. She slowly walked to Scene, reached out and held Scene's warm palm, and gently leaned on his shoulder. Seeing Selena's bird-like appearance that he had never seen before, Craven completely collapsed. Scene didn't look at him anymore. With a thought, Craven was burned clean by the eternal fire, and he didn't even have the chance to scream. There are still a large group of vampires waiting for you to take charge of the situation outside. Scene touched Selena's head. I don't have that ability, and now it should be Marcus' turn to take power. Selena looked at the one with the letter M among the 3 metal circles on the ground. He's awake. Get him up. Scene looked down and knew what was going on below. Selena was stunned when she heard Scene's words, and then she saw that after Victor's body was turned into ashes by the 3-pointed double-edged sword, the blood in the blood transfusion tubes used to keep him awake had flowed underground, and Marcus was awakened like this after Selena stretched out her hand to open the mechanism. Marcus' coffin rose up. He seemed to be much stronger than Victor. His dry body was stimulated by blood and quickly recovered into a demonic form. 2 wings grew behind him, and his skin color showed a strange color. Why didn't the elder wake me up? Deathwalker. Marcus opened his eyes and questioned Selena. He only knew Selena among the 3 people present. Before Selena could answer, the wings behind him turned into a spike and stabbed Selena. Swish. Selena looked at the spikes that suddenly stopped in front of her in horror, and then saw that Marcus' body was cut into countless pieces in the instant just now. It seems that this guy's not suitable to be your new leader. Scene. Put away the 3-pointed double-edged sword. He did not burn Marcus' body with the eternal fire. He just attacked physically. Selena didn't want to be a leader very much. In this case, only the 3rd elder was left. If the 3rd elder is also so tactless, then Scene will have to have a good talk with Selena. If she doesn't become the leader, Scene will have to kill all the vampires. As for Marcus, Scene left his body on purpose so that the remaining elder can see the consequences of disobedience. Go and pick up your remaining elder, Scene said to Selena. After Scene finished speaking, Luckian, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. That I sent a team to attack her before. Selena wanted to draw her gun and shoot him in the head when she heard Luckian's words. Although her family was not killed by werewolves, she has become accustomed to hunting werewolves for so many years. After all, she is also a vampire. Wait. It's still in time to rush over now. If you really kill me, no one can stop my men. The vampire sent by Craven will never help Emilia. She will only die. Luckian said in one breath, fearing that Selena would shoot him away. In the end, Scene decided to let Luckian go to stop his wolf cubs. Luckian didn't expect Scene to let him go like this. He thought Scene would kill him in the end. Victor is dead. Luckian has avenged his great hatred like Selena. To be honest, he doesn't have anything particularly persistent in his heart now, but since Scene gave him the opportunity, he must run away. After all, he is still the leader of the werewolves. Just after Luckian left, Selena took over the castle. Although she was just a deathwalker, the vampires in the castle were all useless people who only knew how to enjoy themselves. Of course, there were some small episodes in the process. Erica, a female vampire who had always liked Craven, instigated a group of people who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to steal chickens after hearing the news that the 2 elders were dead. The lower level vampires also felt that now was the time for them, who were usually ordered around, to rise up. Although there was still an elder alive, according to the news that Erica overheard, the werewolves were going to attack Emilia's special train. Even if Elder Emilia survived, she was in a weak period. Even if they couldn't beat Emilia at that time, they could still use the pretext of revenge for the elders. Moreover, many of these people have been coveting Selena, the moonlight goddess, for a long time. In the past, Victor and Craven were suppressing them. Now their true nature is exposed. Selena looked at the men opposite her who said all kinds of dirty words to her with a cold face. She didn't even bother to call them her own kind. So, when Selena took out Scene's 3-pointed two-edged sword, the useless people on the opposite side immediately peed on the ground. Under the powerful pressure of the 3-pointed two-edged sword, these people didn't even have the courage to fight to the death. Seeing these people who were still talking nonsense in the last second and kneeling down to beg for mercy in the next second, Selena didn't even have the interest to care about them, and she just killed them with the knife. Selena looked at Erica and the vampires with pity as they were burned to death. I hope you can open your eyes in the next life and don't fancy a waste like Craven again. Chapter 80. Full of angry. Accompanying Selena to her room in the castle, there was no special fragrance, and the whole room was as cold as Selena herself. Scene looked up and saw the bed. So, you don't sleep upside down. Hearing Scene's words, Selena remembered his previous question and her cheeks flushed. Scene turned around and saw Selena's cold and tender appearance and realized that he was in her room now. Hey, I didn't expect that you, a girl with thick eyebrows and big eyes, would start to play tricks as Scene stepped forward step by step. Selena, who had made up her mind, suddenly felt a little scared, but Scene had already pushed her to the wall. And there was no way back. Gently hooked Selena's beautiful chin and stroked her lips with his fingers, feeling Scene's gaze and the warmth of his palm. Selena couldn't help but open her mouth slightly and breathe faster, especially when Scene's fingertips reached into her mouth and began to rub her kitten-like fangs. Scene's action made Selena bite his finger involuntarily, but the force was more like flirting. Snap. Selena trembled all over, and her ice blue eyes looked at Scene, who had just spanked her, with horror. For some reason, she had the urge to ask him to do it again. Thinking of this, Selena's cheeks became more and more rosy. Because she was a vampire, her skin was morbidly white. And in this scene, Selena was like a newly blooming peach blossom, white and rosy, delicate and charming. Seeing this beautiful scene, Scene could no longer hold back his anger that had been rising for a long time and directly picked up Selena and threw her on her bed, causing Selena to scream again. But it wasn't over yet. Scene waved his hand, and Selena's black leather jacket that was tightly against her pink skin immediately came off her body. This sudden hand made Selena blush with shame. She wanted to reach out and pull the silk quilt on the bed to cover her body, but Scene held her hands above her head. This action made Selena's chest stand up high, and she closed her eyes tightly, as if she was trying to cover her ears and steal a bell. Anything. Is it okay? Hearing the suppressed voice from Scene's throat and feeling the breath sprayed on her chest, Selena's whole body softened and she twisted slightly under Scene's suppression. Seeing Selena nod slightly, Scene couldn't bear it anymore. In the train station, Elder Emilia was attacked by a werewolf as soon as she entered the train belonging to their vampires. But what surprised her was that, just when she thought she was going to die here today, a long wolf howl suddenly sounded, and all the attacking werewolves stopped for a while. Looking at the figure that slowly walked out, Emilia couldn't believe her eyes. Luckian? How could it be you? Aren't you dead? Craven, this cunning guy. Emilia saw Luckian and immediately realized that Craven had deceived them. You should be glad that I came, otherwise you would definitely die today. Luckian comforted his werewolves, who were eager to pounce on Emilia and tear her apart. What do you want to do? What's your purpose? Emilia looked at Luckian, and under her one-shoulder dress, two big thunders were shaking because of the atmosphere. Luckian sneered and didn't answer, but called on all the werewolves to leave. This anticlimactic assassination made Emilia a little confused. If she didn't know Luckian, she would have suspected that this guy was interested in her and let her go. It was not until Emilia successfully arrived at the castle under the escort of the guards that she learned everything from other vampires, going straight to the elder's sleeping room. Emilia looked at Scene sitting on their elder's exclusive throne and Selena standing beside them. If it were someone else, they would definitely notice that Selena had changed her clothes again. It seems that you already know what happened, Marcus. He is not very obedient, and now you are the only one left. Scene looked up at the only remaining vampire elder and glanced at Marcus, who was scattered on the ground next to him. Seeing the fragments on the ground, Emilia's body trembled slightly. Although she knew that this was Scene's means of intimidating her, she was still afraid. The longer she lived, the more she feared death, especially the way Marcus died. Emilia leaned down and lowered her head, her chin almost buried in her one-shoulder dress. I have no interest in your vampire rule. If Selena didn't want to take the throne, you would be dead now. Emilia carefully looked up at Selena standing next to Scene. She realized that this Death Walker who used to kill people seemed a little different. My lord, what can I do for you? Emilia adjusted her clothes and her kneeling posture. Scene seemed to see a big crack. You can continue to lead your entire clan. Scene also gave Emilia and Selena Natasha's contact information. They would naturally set the rules, but Emilia still looked a little worried. What's wrong? What's the problem? Scene asked. Sir, there is no problem with our vampires, but the werewolves and another vampire have just experienced a power transition recently. Emilia kept showing Scene her big crack. You don't need to worry about that. Nisha will be obedient. As for Luckian, you can tell him that I said it. If he doesn't want to follow the rules, I will go and talk to him in person. Scenes. Domineering words made Amelia's buttocks shrink, and she felt a surge of tide. Amelia had heard of Nisha's name. She knew that she was the new leader of another vampire group. Now it seems that scene pushed her up in secret. After so many years, even if she had no interest in power at the beginning, Emilia has now been intoxicated by the feeling of being high above. In the past, because of the existence of Victor and Marcus, she had to be controlled by these two guys, but from today on, she has the final say in the entire vampire world, which also made her determined to hold Scene's thighs tightly. Watching Scene walking out with his arms around Selena's blushing waist, Emilia's eyes were filled with an inexplicable light. Hey, isn't this our great singer? Emilia met Selena in the corridor. After handling the internal affairs of the vampires, because of Scene's presence, the area around Selena's room has been cleared. I can't believe it. You used to be so cold and disdainful of everything, but now you play more than me. Emilia thought of the things she overheard that made her blush, and joked to Selena. Hearing Emilia's words, Selena had no power to refute. Who told her that she was enjoying it? She had never thought that she actually had this kind of hobby. Could it be that the shadow left by her childhood was too deep? But what Emilia said next made Selena suddenly shudder. Chapter 81. I enjoy life here and never miss my homeland. Hello, my security advisor. Why do you have time to call me? Hearing Tony's mean voice, Scene was a little irritated. He was very angry now, and Tony's call came at the wrong time. What do you think? Since the expo ended, your attendance rate has not been as high as that of Agent Romanoff, whose consultant is as laid back as you. Scene lay on the comfortable and soft bed with a confused look on his face, ignoring Tony, who sounded resentful on the other side of the phone, like a bitch in a deep house. Hello, is anyone home? Tony shouted loudly on the phone, when Scene ignored him. What on earth do you want to say? Well, Scene held up the phone helplessly. He really wanted to fly back and blow this guy's brains out, but immediately his expression changed again. TSK. Hearing a strange voice coming from the other side of the phone, Tony frowned and asked, are you eating? Last chance. If you don't say it again, never say it again. Phew. Hearing Scene's heavy breathing on the phone, Tony suddenly thought of the two glowing red dots. He thought Scene was angry. Otherwise, with his colorful experiences, he would definitely have realized what was happening on Scene's side. Such a situation. Today, I went to see the big black guy from S.H.I.E.L.D. You should have known about his Superboy team's plan, right? HMM. Well, if you're talking about the Avengers, I know. Please help me ask dear Agent Romanoff, what does it mean that Iron Man meets the requirements for recommendation to enter the Avengers program, but Tony Stark does not? They are not reasonable at all. How can they accept one but not me? The real me. Why don't you ask her yourself? Huh? Ice Blue Eyes looked at Scene with a little dissatisfaction. I can't untie the crossbar. Can I untie it? Scene stared with wide eyes at the third person who suddenly walked into the room, and looked in disbelief at the pink moonlight female slave who began to avoid his questioning gaze. Scene couldn't see it anyway. Tony rolled his eyes and thought, with your strength, who can lock you? Scene, brother, do you think that the cross we both feel means the same thing? Forget it. Let's get down to business. A guy named Charles Xavier invited us to visit his manor. You fucking talked for a long time before getting down to business. Scene was a little speechless, but for the sake of the surprise he just discovered, I'll forgive you, Kit. This name is a bit special. Scene replied. The famous professor, of course it's special. He is a mutant. It is said that he can control people's hearts. Tony's tone was obviously curious and a little afraid of this ability to see through and control people's hearts. What do you think? Should we go? Tony asked Scene's opinion. Professor X's ability is still very intimidating to ordinary people, especially Scene who has a special secret. However, after thinking for a while, Scene agreed. He was confident in his own strength. To take a step back, Professor X is not a villain. After the conversation with Tony ended in this way, Scene finally understood what it means to have a threesome point, and Tony finally realized what Scene was busy with when he answered the phone the next night, because that night Pepper came back to sleep with Tony. Shit. What a shame. Tony cursed secretly, feeling that all those models on the magazine covers he had slept with were in vain. But when he thought that a pair of models were twins, he had some aftertaste. At this time, Pepper glanced at Tony strangely. Why suddenly, New York, in an unknown small station. Storm Aurora Monroe and Cyclops Scott Summers are looking for a little girl. Anna Mary. Scott looked up at the big screen displaying train information. In front of him, he noticed that Xiaodao's eyes had been staring at him. When he lowered his head, he realized that two children were staring at his high-tech glasses. He smiled at the two little guys, but his supposedly friendly smile turned out to be a pervert in the eyes of the little guy's mother, who quickly took the two children away from him. A weirdo. While Scott was distracted, Aurora, who went to the ticket office to inquire, was grabbed by the throat by the saber-toothed tiger who followed them. Seeing that his companions were restrained because there were too many people at the station, Scott could not directly launch a laser attack, so he could only rush forward to help. Who knew that his technologically advanced glasses were hooked away by a disgusting long tongue? Suddenly his laser eyes lost their restraints, and the red light that shot into the sky broke through the roof of the station. At this time, the surrounding crowd also burst into violent laughter. Sir, the New York Police Department just received a call. After collecting the camera records, I'm convinced that this should be a criminal case related to mutants. Tony, who is in the process of incubating the armor, received a reminder from his smart butler Jarvis. Looking at the astonishing destructive power of Scott's laser eyes on the blue light screen, he walked towards the suit console. George Stacy threw the unfinished coffee cup into the trash can in annoyance and called on the police officers to drive away quickly. The kiss, hug, and lift with the little girl tonight was ruined again. Aurora, who was caught by the saber-toothed tiger in the station, began to roll her eyes. She was not choked to the point of being unable to breathe. Just when her eyeballs turned white, the lightning that had been accumulating for half a day in the sky above the roof that was broken by Scott also struck the saber-toothed tiger. With a cry of pain, the saber-toothed tiger was immediately struck by the lightning and flew out, smashing the wall. At this time, on the platform of the station, a train that had just departed suddenly stopped with emergency brakes. Logan in the carriage looked at the light bulb that flickered and finally went out, shrugged his nose, and stood up from his seat. He smelled the smell of danger. Sure enough, in the dark car, all the metal objects were stuck to the car wall, as if being fiddled by an invisible hand, and the rear of the car was torn apart by a huge force. Sparks flew, and a floating figure appeared at the rear of the car. Logan watched the helmeted man slowly fall down vigilantly, and with his arms spread, 3 sharp metal claws emerged from the joints between his fists. Wolverine? Eric Lanshier looked at Logan, who showed his claws to him, and admired his courage in his heart. Eric gently stretched out a hand, and Logan immediately felt that his body was no longer under his control, as if his bones were fixed. He struggled hard, but as Eric's fingers opened, Logan felt that his claws were also forcibly opened, and the pain from the bones immediately appeared on Logan's flushed face. You are covered in metal. It is really not challenging to deal with you, Eric said contemptuously. Why the hell are you looking for me? Logan, who was insulted, said angrily. Looking for you? Narcissism is not a good habit, Eric. And Logan, who heard the words, immediately looked at the terrified little naughty Anna Mary next to them. At this moment, a burst of music suddenly sounded in the sky. This old man in a cloak, please put down the werewolf and raise your hands to surrender. Otherwise, I will not respect the elderly and love the young. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82: Iron Man commits suicide by lying on the railway tracks. Magneto, Eric and Wolverine. Logan looked at Iron Man in the sky at the same time, aiming at them with the palm cannon. Logan suddenly looked at Tony in the sky with a sympathetic look. The battle suit of this guy was exactly the same as his adamantium alloy. Facing this guy who could control metal, He was like a meat bun hitting a dog. Seeing Iron Man coming out halfway, Eric was almost laughing. He looked at Logan, who was fixed by him, and at Tony, who was bragging in the sky point. If someone else came, he might be more cautious. Are you two metal guys here to make fun of me? Magneto, really kicked cotton when I provoked you. Eric didn't even stretch out his hand, but just glanced at Tony, and Tony immediately felt a force coming. Sir, there is an unknown magnetic field around you, which may cause the Iron Man suit to be restricted. Tony, who was knocked down from the sky by Magneto's power, heard the kind reminder from his caring butler Jarvis, and struggled to complain. Yes, I noticed it too. Thank you so much for your reminder. Because of the Iron Man suit's wrapping, Tony can't even move a finger now, and is completely restricted to the railroad tracks. Sir, do you need me to contact Mr. Hunter for help? Hearing Jarvis's embarrassing words, Tony wanted to say no to his good assistant, but it was a pity that he was useless. Tony really didn't expect to meet a mutant who was a natural nemesis of him. He originally planned to show off his muscles in front of these mutants, but now he was shown off by others. Magneto Eric didn't care about Tony's life or death. He could crush Tony's armor directly, but he had more important things to do at the moment. Thinking of his great plan, he didn't want to make trouble at this juncture. Then he turned around and waved at Logan, who was still immobilized, and Logan flew out like a cannonball. The little naughty Mary, who had reacted, immediately turned around and ran in the opposite direction of the carriage, but unfortunately, Magneto manipulated a syringe and shot it directly into her body. The anesthetic in the syringe took effect immediately, and the little naughty Mary fainted directly in the aisle of the carriage. Too young and too naive. Eric shook his head with disappointment, but there was a bit of pride in his tone. When George Stacy and a group of police officers arrived at the station, they happened to see Magneto and his group carrying the fainted little naughty out. Okay, just stand there, put the person down, and put your hands up, and hold your head with both hands. Now, looking at these guys dressed a little weird, George Stacy was impatient and shouted with a loudspeaker. George Stacy looked at his men who surrounded the station, and then looked at the weapons in each of their hands, and looked proudly at Magneto and his group who walked out of the station. What's wrong with mutants? They are still mortals. If you can dodge a bullet, let me see. George Stacy thought. When Magneto heard the police on the other side ask him to raise his hands, he smiled and did it obediently. But 2 police cars were also raised with his hands. Hey, isn't this Iron Man? What's wrong? What happened? Are you so depressed that you want to commit suicide by lying on the railway tracks? Tony, who was still lying on the railway tracks, finally breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this voice. He didn't realize that as long as Scene was there, he felt that everything was not a big deal. That's because someone called me last time and forced me to listen to a live broadcast. I feel that my ears and my heart are not clean, and I need to lie on the railway tracks to purify it. Although he was very happy in his heart, he couldn't admit defeat. Oh, then I'll go save others first. You stay here and purify yourself slowly. Hey, just kidding, buddy. Tony saw that Scene was really going to leave, so he quickly admitted his mistake. He didn't want to lie here overnight. Not to mention whether there would be a train passing by. The cool wind was blowing. What if he got diarrhea when he went back? Seeing that he admitted his mistake, Scene stopped teasing him and snapped his fingers. The magnetic field around Tony immediately returned to normal, and his battle suit was free again. All the mutants here are mutants, especially the guy who can control the magnetic field, who is a bit of a hindrance to me. You should go ahead, and I'll cheer for you from the side. Tony introduced the situation to Scene, and especially emphasized the existence of Magneto Eric to save some face for his embarrassing behavior just now. Don't worry, I'll take you to see someone first. Scene raised his eyebrows first, then smiled mysteriously at Tony. Just now, Scene felt a strange energy sweeping over him, and then it began to impact his mind, as if it had discovered something. Just when Scene was about to use magic to resist, the eternal fire in his body jumped violently, and then the power that invaded him was burned out. Outside the station, an ordinary family car was parked outside the crowded police and crowds. Jane Grey, with reddish brown hair, frowned suddenly when she looked at Professor X. Charles Xavier, beside her. She asked, "What's wrong, Professor?" "I met a very interesting person." Charles smiled and then looked at the two figures that suddenly appeared outside the car. "Hey, I told you I would come by myself. Come by myself." Tony, who was squatting on the side, opened the steel mask, held the flower bed, and looked at Scene, who was standing straight and handsome, unhappily. "Hurry up like this." Scene looked at the two spiritual masters in the car. He felt another spiritual force peeking at his true face under the mask. "If you want to know so much, I can show you, but not here," Scene said with a smile. While looking at Jane Grey, who activated her mutant power on him, Jin was surprised and embarrassed to hear that her little action was discovered. "Yes, I'm sorry. It's nothing. I've said it all. If you really want to see it, I can show it to you, but not here." Scene waved his hand. Hey, man. The guns are loaded over there. Why are you still here to pick up girls?" Tony, who had recovered, looked at Scene, who was only talking to the beautiful woman in the car, and couldn't help but remind him. "Do you want me to help, Professor?" Charles pondered after hearing Scene's words. He was a spiritual master. Even if he couldn't get into Scene's mind, he could get into other people's, except his good friend wearing a helmet, so he knew Scene's identity and Scene's abilities. He was just thinking, if Scene took action to solve the problem, what would happen to his good friend Eric? He couldn't let Eric go blatantly, but he was also unwilling to hand Eric over to humans. It was so difficult. Chapter 83. You are too weak. Charles, you don't even dare to face me now. After hearing what his good friend Eric said, Charles just didn't want to confront him directly. He controlled the saber-toothed tiger beside Eric to control Eric, and then controlled the toad carrying the little naughty Mary to leave the scene first. Unfortunately, Eric knew Charles too well. Seeing that his good friend was unwilling to come out to meet him, he thought about it and immediately loaded the guns of all the police officers present and floated in the air ready to point at each police officer. This trick really worked on Charles. He was immediately controlled by Eric's actions and stopped his psychic ability. "You won't take action?" Tony watched the tense momentum from the side. If it weren't for his armor being easily controlled by others, he would have rushed up to kill the guy who was more powerful than him. "It's just a little conflict between two old friends. There's no fight." Although Scene said so, if there was really something, he would be able to save everyone in the first time. Charles looked at Scene gratefully, knowing that Scene was giving him a chance. In the end, Charles had no choice but to make an exchange with Eric and let them go. "Would you like to go to my manor and have a chat?" Charles invited Tony and Scene with grace, as if it was not him who had just confronted Magneto. Tony looked at Scene and motioned him to make the decision. "Forget about it in the middle of the night. I don't have the habit of talking to men all night. Let's visit again tomorrow during the day." Scene stretched out his hand, and two circular portals with sparks appeared immediately. "Why didn't you use this trick just now? You just want to see me make a fool of myself, right?" Tony remembered that Scene had this way of appearing handsome, mysterious and high-end, but he had to do something like teleportation. Just the feeling of space squeezing made him vomit like picking a dog every time. "You are too weak. Besides, this move is suitable for long-range use. Instant teleportation is more convenient at close range." After Scene walked into a circle, the circle quickly shrank, and his voice could no longer be heard. Rolling his eyes unhappily, Tony also said hello to Charles and Jane Grey, and walked towards the portal on the other side of his mansion. Jane Grey looked at Scene's special ability with curiosity. She also watched the video of Shadowman fighting to Shreks on the internet. She even thought that Scene was a mutant like them and reported it to the professor. However, their mutant school pays more attention to the kind of adolescent mutants who have just shown their mutant abilities. They can only win over adult men like Scene. So Charles invited Tony and Scene to the manor for a chat. "Professor, what kind of mutant ability is this? Have you seen it before?" Jane Grey was still staring at the sparks scattered on the ground where Scene and the others left. "Each mutant may show different abilities. I dare not say that I have seen all the mutant abilities. In addition, shouldn't you care about Scott and Ororo?" Charles looked at his good student Jane with tenderness and kindness after Professor X's reminder. Jane Grey remembered the two people who were forgotten in the station. One was squatting there with his eyes covered and dared not open his eyes at all, and the other was pinched by a saber-toothed tiger and fainted point after Jane ran into the station. She first used her psychic ability to wake up Aurora, who had fainted. Then the two of them helped Scott, who dared not open his eyes, to get on the bus. At this time, Logan also woke up, and several people returned to Professor X's Manor Academy together. Just when Logan was arguing with Charles and others about letting Eric go, an unexpected person came to the door. Congressman Kelly, who had strongly supported the mutant registration bill. According to Congressman Kelly, Magneto Eric built a machine, and it was this machine that turned him from a normal human into a mutant. After hearing what Congressman Kelly said, Charles realized the seriousness of the problem. He wanted to find the traces of Eric and his group through the brainwave enhancer, but what he didn't expect was that the brainwave enhancer had a problem, which directly caused him to faint. What's wrong? The next morning, Sean and Tony came to Professor X's manor, but he saw that, whether it was Jane Grey or others, they all looked like they were dying. Yesterday, the professor used the brainwave enhancer to find the whereabouts of Magneto, and there was a problem. Now he is still in a coma. Jane Grey explained, and she looked at Sean in surprise, probably because she didn't expect that Sean had such a face under the mask. It seems that there will be no food here today, Tony said meanly. Sean couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. Others are in a coma. Can you be a little more restrained? Ignore this guy. Let him starve to death. Who are these two? Scott asked Sean and Tony, who were still visiting at this time. Although he knew Tony's identity, he felt uncomfortable when he saw this playboy and Sean's appearance. That would make all men hostile, especially Sean's appearance of being very familiar with Jane, which made him even more uncomfortable. Just after Scott asked, Jane glanced at him, and her eyes clearly said that she knew what you were thinking. But what time was it now? Scott was obviously used to Jane's behavior of being able to read his mind at any time. He shrugged and thought to himself, it's all men's nature. Then, do you need help? Jane didn't know Sean's ability. She shook her head and said, no one except the professor can withstand the power of the brainwave enhancer, and I can't either. Only with the brainwave enhancer can we find the whereabouts of Magneto and others. Hearing Jane's confident words, Tony retorted before Sean opened his mouth. Although I don't know if the brainwave enhancer you mentioned is really as powerful as you said, but your tone is too confident, right? At least I know several ways to find the guy who controls magnetism. Really? Then I don't know which girlfriend of yours you plan to ask for help. Scott couldn't help but retort when he heard Tony's words. He felt that Tony was just a man who had a few stinky money and loved to show off. Scott. Jane couldn't help but interrupt Scott, who was talking to Tony. She read Tony's mind. Can you find the whereabouts of Magneto? Jane said this to Sean because one of the methods she read that Tony thought of was Sean. It's not a difficult thing, Sean said and closed his eyes. Seeing Sean's superstitious look, Scott was even more disdainful. They will go to Ellis Island tonight. Ellis Island? Isn't that where the summit is held? Many leaders of countries will be there tonight, Tony said immediately. He had found the key point of the matter at once. Chapter 84, Smiling like a pervert. Are you sure? Jane looked straight at Sean. If it weren't for Sean, she would have been ready to force the brainwave enhancer to find Magneto's whereabouts. Sean nodded and said affirmatively. Just like Tony said, Magneto plans to use a machine to transform the heads of those countries into mutants. This is his plan. How do you know? Although Scott thought Sean's words made sense, he couldn't help but ask doubtfully, as long as I want, there is nothing in this world that I can't hear. Sean didn't bother to pay attention to this guy. He saw Jane looking at him curiously, so he answered, so, as long as we go to Ellis Island, we can find that damn guy, right? Logan had been listening to Aurora for a long time, and finally couldn't help but ask with a ferocious face, Logan, calm down, don't forget that Magneto's ability restrains you. Aurora saw that Logan wanted to leave now, and hurriedly stopped him. Hearing Aurora's reminder, Logan paused and clenched his fists in anger. This was the most aggrieved he had felt in such a long time. Damn it, he suddenly hated his own iron body. What? Aurora said makes sense, and we haven't confirmed the authenticity of this news. Scott continued to say, enough. Scott. Jane stared at Scott with anger and disgust. He was really annoying today, especially in front of outsiders. In fact, part of the reason why Jane was angry was that she felt that Scott didn't believe in her at all. He knew that his psychic ability could see through people's hearts, but he always deliberately fanned the flames. Although Jane really couldn't see through SYN, she could see through Tony Point in her mind. Although most of the pictures were not suitable for children, at least SYN's ability was certified. Tony's trust in SYN's ability was almost blind. Point seeing Jane treat him like this, Scott's face turned red and white. After all, he is your boyfriend and the captain of the X-Men. How dare you do this in front of two outsiders? Aurora saw that the situation was not right, so she quickly tried to smooth things over and pulled Scott away. There were still many students in the manor, and they had to explain to those students, I've been annoyed with that kid for a long time. Logan tilted his head and spat to the side. I'm sorry, I apologize to you on his behalf. She said you, but Jane's eyes were only on SYN. Although your apology is a bit heartless, I still accept it. Tony looked at the two people who were flirting with each other and rolled his eyes. This guy really attracts a lot of peach blossoms wherever he goes, and it was obviously my patent before. So, what are you going to do next? If Magneto really succeeds, it will be a disaster for mankind. We X-Men will definitely stop him. Jane said with momentum. I just want to save little naughty Mary. Logan was not so compassionate. He had lived long enough and lost his memory, and he didn't have a good impression of those leaders. Although SYN knew that the villains would fail in the end, he always felt that they were not good enough when looking at these guys. X-Men. Is this your mutant Supergirl team? This name reminded Tony of another Superboy group that refused him to join. Point hearing Tony's complaints, Logan suppressed his mouth. He liked Jane and didn't want to show his ridicule in front of Jane, but he really thought that nicknames like Cyclops, Storm, Magneto were funny. Wolverine is not much better. Jane rolled her eyes. Shit, I forgot that this woman can read minds. Logan subconsciously raised his hand to cover his mouth, but in return, Jane rolled his eyes even more. Point Tony continued, if you want to find the guy who manipulated magnetism last night, I can help. After all, I still have a score to settle with him. As he spoke, he took out his phone and gave Jarvis an order to speed up the assembly point. After returning home last night, Tony added a new suit baby plan in his iron suit delivery room. This suit is an anti-magnetic armor suit specifically designed to deal with Magneto. Point it would take some time to produce it according to the normal assembly process, but now that the situation is so urgent, money will open the way to speed up. He is a man who holds grudges. Just after Tony gave Jarvis the order, he turned his head and looked at SYN. Why are you looking at me? What do you have to do if I'm going to go up? SYN raised his eyebrows. Tony looked at SYN shyly. Can you stop smiling like a pervert? SYN frowned with disgust. Then, you can cheer for me from the side. As a security consultant, this request is not too much, right? Tony said. Point he actually wanted to ask SYN to back him up. Tony was very thoughtful in his work. He liked to do things to perfection. Even if it was a problem that he had not considered this time, as long as he encountered it, he would definitely have a corresponding solution next time. Point. Although he had to settle accounts with Magneto, he had to guard against Magneto's other methods. As long as SYN was there, he could let go and do it. Point Jane also suddenly looked at SYN with expectation. This girl read Tony's mind again. Just do it. He can't make any waves. After SYN's assurance, Tony was very happy, Jane was very relaxed, and only Logan looked at the three people in confusion. Point Logan, did something happen that I don't know about? Then they went to the basement of Charles Manor to discuss the countermeasures for tonight. Point Scott looked at the constantly changing simulated sandbox in front of him with arrogance. Point Tony didn't want to attack him. Tony didn't use this thing for a long time. Now Tony uses holographic projection. Point Aurora brought another news. Congressman Kelly, who was transformed into a mutant, died. That is to say, Magneto's machine has problems. Even if he succeeds in transformation, those leaders will eventually die soon, which will also lead to a global disaster, and he doesn't know how much power to use to control the machine. Maybe he will directly kill everyone in New York City. Then we must stop him. We go down from the George Washington Bridge and sail to. Scott passionately described his infiltration plan. Aurora and Logan listened very carefully. Logan also asked about some details. Jane wanted to speak up, but felt that it would be too much of a blow to Scott. Although you may find it harsh, I still want to say that this shit plan is a bit too troublesome. Tony said what Jane wanted to say, but didn't point, although Logan, who was dedicated to saving people, was a little unhappy with Tony's interruption. He couldn't suppress his smile when he heard Tony scolding Scott. What the hell do you mean? Scott was full. Half of his face was angry, and the upper half of his face was really invisible under his sunglasses. Aurora also looked at Tony with dissatisfaction. She didn't understand why Jane invited these two guys to participate in the action, and the professor even specially invited these two guys to their school. Scott, your plan is really a bit troublesome. Chapter 85. Are you serious about taking a half step back? Scott stared at Jane with a pair of bull eyes. If he hadn't been wearing sunglasses, the laser would have been fired at full power. You just wanted to say shit, didn't you? Scott felt very wronged. Tony, the playboy, didn't get along with him, but now Jane Grey also betrayed the revolution. Scene can send us directly to the island. Tony patted Scene's shoulder and boasted with a proud face. Jane also nodded to others to prove that what Tony said was true. Then, prepare yourself. We will set off when the time comes. Logan directly set the tone and interrupted Scott, who wanted to ask questions. Logan is a veteran. He has experienced wars of all sizes. Although he has lost his memory now, his intuition is still there. He feels that Magneto's group is not so easy to deal with, especially now that his teammates are such a group of inexperienced mutants. Among these people, the only one Logan can feel threatened is Scene, who is standing aside in a suit and playing with his mobile phone. Logan has a keen sense of all kinds of dangers around him, just like an animal in his senses. Scene, who was standing there, looked harmless, smiling and chatting with someone on the phone, but he was a sleeping giant beast, while the other people looked like chihuahuas in Logan's eyes. I hope Mary can be rescued successfully this time. Logan frowned with some worry. Who are you chatting with? You are smiling so lasciviously, Tony asked Scene, while admiring Charles's manner. To be honest, this manner full of ancient atmosphere is really good, and Tony wants to get one. Report the current situation of the missing people. Scene shook his phone at Tony. Tony understood instantly when he saw the big head photo of Agent Romanov on Scene's chat interface. So, did you join their Superboy team? Tony's indifferent expression concealed his envy. Why? What's wrong with me, Tony Stark? No, you were ejected by them too? Hearing Scene's answer, Tony immediately imagined a scene in his mind where Natasha told Scene all kinds of ridiculous personality problems. No, I rejected them. Scene looked at Tony with a smile on his face and then walked towards the basketball court. WTF. Why? It seems that the Avengers are too low class and unworthy of his identity as Tony Iron Man. He will resign from this consultant position when he returns. Tony muttered and followed Scene's footsteps. Hi. Scene looked at the little girl who was looking forward to Anshai on the sidelines. Hello, sir. The little girl was obviously a slightly introverted and shy person, especially under Scene's saturated appearance attack. She looked a bit like a frightened little animal. I'm Scene Hunter. Why don't you play basketball with them? Scene looked at the boys and girls who were fighting for the basketball on the basketball court and suddenly remembered his lost youth. I'm Katie. Katie didn't say why she didn't go on stage. Maybe because the little girl was naturally shy. Hello, little beauty. I don't need to introduce myself. Tony, who followed him, showed his signature smile, but Katie leaned towards Scene the moment he approached. Little girl, what do you mean by taking a step back? I know you. Tony Stark. Teacher Aurora told us to stay away from you when we see you. Katie looked serious. It seems that someone is really famous. Looking at Tony's increasingly dark face, Scene could no longer suppress the corners of his mouth. There are good and bad reputations outside, and besides, that was in the past. Brother is now a good man. Okay. Tony rolled his eyes and looked at Scene, who laughed at him. How good can you be as a guy who flirts with others? But he didn't dare to say such words in front of Scene. This is not cowardice, but mainly because he doesn't like red. Night fell quickly, and Tony's custom-made battle suit was also airlifted outside the manor. He went to pick it up, and Scene and others stayed in the basement of the manor to make final preparations. Ah, you serious? Logan raised his eyebrows and looked at the black close-fitting leather jacket handed over by Scott, with an X logo in a circle on it. How about changing you to a yellow elastic body shaper? Scott complained while throwing the clothes over. This is the uniform they carefully made. Okay. You ready? Tony walked in wearing a new battle suit, and everyone's attention was immediately attracted. Logan, who was halfway wearing his top, looked at Tony's new battle suit and suddenly felt a little ashamed of the uniform on his body. Scene was also looking at the new battle suit on Tony. He saw at a glance that the material of this battle suit was different from the previous ones. You going to the dance? Tony looked at Scene still wearing his suit. Didn't you ask me to cheer for you? Scene answered seriously. Do you want me to get you a uniform? Jane saw Scene and Tony quarreling and pointed to the cloakroom and asked Scene kindly. She thought Scene didn't bring his Shadowman suit with him. No need. Scene opened his hands, and the well-tailored suit on his body instantly turned into Shadowman's battle suit in a golden red light, and the black cape behind him slowly fell down. You the Shadowman on the internet? Aurora obviously recognized Scene's outfit. Logan shuddered. Since he awakened his mutant power, he had never felt so dangerous that he seemed to be killed. Then he looked at Scene's clothes, and then at the clothes Scott gave him. He pulled his collar uncomfortably and glanced at Scott, who was silent next to him. Seeing Scene pretending to be cool and stealing his limelight, Tony suddenly wanted to slap himself twice for his bad mouth. Okay, let's go. As Scene raised his hand, a circular portal with sparks appeared in front of everyone. After walking through the portal, they arrived at Liberty Island, the island where the Statue of Liberty holding a torch was located. Because leaders of various countries were to be present, the security measures of Ellis Island were very strict, and Magneto could not find a chance to sneak in. Fortunately, the range of his machine is controlled by the size of the input mutant ability, so he does not need to break into the summit. The Statue of Liberty Island across the sea from Ellis Island became his first choice. Kin and Aurora looked at the scenery of the Statue of Liberty Island they were familiar with curiosity. Scene's ability was really useful and saved them a lot of trouble. Scott had a constipated expression on his face. Even without Scene's superpowers, he could take everyone to arrive by jet fighter. Okay, sir. The scan found that there are strange new devices under the torch of the Statue of Liberty. Tony heard Jarvis's voice and immediately reminded everyone to look up. I'll go up to settle accounts with him first. You guys take your time. Hey, wait, we still. Scott didn't finish his words, and there was no time to stop him. Tony had already flown up. Looking at the tail flame of the distant battlesuit, Scott cursed this unruly guy in his heart, but he turned his head and found that the others were gone. Come on, Scott. Aurora waved in front. Who the hell is the captain? Exclamation mark. Chapter 86 Grand Scene. Scene and his group didn't see a single person along the way. It seemed that Magneto had helped them deal with the guards here. Everyone entered the museum under the statue and heard an alarm. After walking a few steps, beep beep, looking back at the source of the sound behind him, it turned out that the metal skeleton on Logan's body triggered the alarm when he passed through the metal detector. Manny brother? Scott looked at Logan helplessly. Buff, the metal detector that Logan stretched out his wolf claws to insert lit up a burst of sparks, and the annoying alarm stopped, and he also gave Scott, who was looking at him, a metal middle finger. There's no one here. Why are you so obedient? Why don't you just walk by the side? Logan probably didn't expect that he had the most combat experience among these people, but he was the first to have problems. Scene looked up at the one-person high Statue of Liberty in front of him, which was a replica of the Statue of Liberty in proportion. He remembered a popular saying on the internet before: if you have a mystique, you have all the women in the world. Have you never seen a statue? Or have you never seen the Statue of Liberty? Scott finally seized the opportunity to complain about Scene Point, but Scene ignored him and reached out to grab the neck of the statue in front of him. Point in the surprised eyes of everyone, the originally grey-white skin of the statue began to flash blue waves as Scene's strength increased. The statue immediately revealed his true appearance, Mystique. Aurora looked at the blue monster in Scene's hand. Point Scott felt that the remaining half of his face was hit and slapped. Point Mystique, who was clamped by Scene, still wanted to struggle, and she raised her foot and kicked Scene. Point unfortunately, under Scene's huge force, the blue-skinned leg just lifted halfway and twitched because of suffocation. Her hands also tightly grasped Scene's arms, trying to break free from Scene's clamp. Point. If it was a normal human state, Scene might still be interested, but Mystique's original appearance was really a bit disappointing. Wait. Ask her where Mary is. Logan saw that Mystique was about to be strangled to death by Scene, and hurriedly said. Point. Scene relaxed a little, and Mystique was hanging in the air limply, gasping for breath, as if she had been saved from drowning. Point. Just as Logan was about to step forward to interrogate her, a dark green shadow quickly rushed towards them. Point. Scott was kicked out first, followed by Jane and Aurora, who were stunned. Point. Here we can see how lacking their combat experience is. Fortunately, there is a veteran like Logan on the scene. Point. However, Logan's fighting style is indeed a bit reckless, relying on his immortal body to go straight at the guy, and the two of them immediately rolled out in their arms. Mystique, who had recovered, also attacked Scene again at the first time. With the help of Scene's arm strength, she twisted her waist and kicked Scene's head in the air, reaching out and grabbing the ankle of the big blue foot. Scene squeezed it hard with a look of disgust. A scream immediately spread throughout the museum, and Mystique felt that all the bones in her ankle were broken. Point. As Scene threw his hand, Mystique flew out and hit the wall next to her, screaming again. Point. Lying on the ground, Mystique felt that her organs were also severely damaged, and blood began to flow out of her mouth. Point. She struggled to get up and looked at her deformed ankle. With fear in her eyes, the Toad on the other side saw that Mystique had suffered a great loss, stretched out his tongue to circle the beam on the top, dodged Logan, who was rushing towards him with his sharp claws, and then swung towards Scene. Point. In midair, the Toad retracted his tongue that was circling the beam and swung towards Scene again. Point. Looking at the disgusting thing, Scene stretched out his hand and summoned the three-pointed double-edged sword. Tony asked Jarvis to scan the specific situation on the torch while flying towards the torch quickly. It seems that some people just can't learn their lesson. Magneto looked at Iron Man getting closer and closer below and said to himself sarcastically, if you raise your hands and surrender now, I can spare your face. Tony said meanly, young man, I really want to know who gave you the courage to talk to me like this. Magneto didn't take Tony seriously at all. Point. Seeing that the negotiation failed, although he didn't expect it to succeed, Tony rushed directly towards Magneto, and this time he also wanted Magneto to feel the feeling of falling from a high altitude. Point. Magneto stretched out his hand with disdain, and this time he was ready to let Tony fall to pieces directly. Point. But the expected scene of Tony being fixed by him did not appear. Instead, he flew towards him at a faster speed. Point. Roar. Just before Tony was about to catch Magneto, the saber-toothed tiger on the side suddenly pushed Magneto out, so Tony grabbed the saber-toothed tiger that suddenly appeared and flew into the sky. Point. Because he had to guard against Magneto's magnetic manipulation, Tony changed the material of his battlesuit, which led to a slight decline in the defense of this battlesuit. Point. So the sharp nails of the saber-tooth tiger had already made several scratches on his battlesuit, which also brought Tony a lot of trouble. Point. Seeing this, Tony immediately ordered Jarvis to open the chest cannon, and a shot sent the saber-toothed tiger flying out, and in the cold and silent night sky, it fell into the river around Liberty Island. What a mad dog. Tony curled his lips as he watched Jarvis report on the damage to the suit appear in front of him. Point. Then he turned around and flew towards the torch. The old man Magneto was still waiting for him there. Point. Magneto was indeed an experienced old mutant. he immediately understood that Tony had changed the material of the suit and was no longer affected by him. Seeing Tony solve the saber-toothed tiger and fly towards him again, Magneto was not afraid. He should not have too many things to control around him. Okay. As Magneto slowly raised his hands, the metal products around him followed his command and flew towards Tony like a surrendering army. The scene, like 1,000 swords returning to their roots, immediately made Tony's heart jump. He thought that he could fight Magneto after solving the problem of the suit, but he didn't expect that the old man would easily give him such a big scene. Tony immediately fell into a bitter battle. In the museum below, Scene's sight looked through the obstacles at Tony, who was dodging in the sky. At his feet was a Toad rolling on the ground with his mouth covered, and Mystique with a broken ankle and bloody mouth by the wall. Just now, Scene took out a 3-pointed double-edged knife out of thin air, and not only cut off the tongue of the Toad with one knife, but also burned the disgusting tongue clean with golden red flames. Now the mouth of the Toad has been burned empty, and the air is filled with a burnt smell. Ororo didn't expect that the fighting power of several people was so weak, and he didn't expect Scene to solve it so easily by himself. Logan stared at Scene's long knife. He had a feeling that even his indestructible wolf claws could not withstand the attack of the long knife. Jane looked at Scene standing there, looking up at the ceiling, and asked, "What are you looking at, Tony?" "Is playing dodgeball with Magneto. Let's go up and cheer for him." Scene looked down at Jane and replied with a smile. Chapter 87 Falling Asleep. Tony dodged in the air, sweating profusely. If Jarvis hadn't helped him, he might have been strung up like a candied horse. On the other hand, Magneto Eric looked calm and at ease. Tony realized that he had underestimated Magneto. Although his suit had been upgraded to avoid the influence of Magneto's magnetic control, Magneto's attack method still made him overwhelmed. While the two were fighting, Scene and his group reached the top floor. As soon as Logan saw Magneto, he rushed over impatiently, not thinking about the fact that he was restrained. He stopped in the air halfway through his flight, and it seemed to others that the picture suddenly stopped. Logan, Ororo, Jane and Scott saw that Logan was being controlled and were about to attack when they were controlled by the experienced Magneto with iron bars one by one. As early as when Scene and the others came up, Magneto had already discovered their traces. After all, with Logan, a humanoid metal, they were like a positioning device for Magneto. Although Jane and Ororo have mutant abilities, their physical strength is that of ordinary people, and they can't struggle against the blockade of iron bars. Jane's psychic ability is not strong enough, and her current control is not enough to bend the iron bars. The statue has a lightning protection device, so Ororo's lightning attack is useless. Scott also closed his eyes tightly. His laser mirror was taken away by Magneto. Now if he opens his eyes, Jane in front of him will be immediately shot in the head by his laser. Scene looked at the iron bars tied to his body, and I didn't do anything. Seeing that his teammates were wiped out as soon as they came up, Tony really wanted to complain on the microphone. That's it. Where did you get the courage to say you want to stop Magneto? Can you lose faster? You young people, you always think you can change the world with your passion. You are as naive as Charles. You are worthy of being his student. Magneto said disdainfully. If his old friend Charles came, he might be a little worried, but these guys are not even worthy of being taken seriously by him. I am not that guy's student. Tony did not forget to answer while dodging Magneto's attack. Magneto sneered. Tony's change of the material of his battlesuit did surprise him at first, but with his years of experience, he was more than enough to deal with Tony. I have met Senator Kelly. Jane tried to persuade Magneto with his mouth. Oh, really? That guy is really lucky, which shows that his mutant ability is very strong. Magneto was a little surprised. He is dead. The final result of those people below will be the same as him. Ororo added beside her. She was a witness to the death of Senator Kelly. Unfortunately, their mouth-to-mouth did not work for Magneto, who was a firm believer. He would not give up what he was going to do, just because of a few words. Why? Don't you guys understand what I'm going to do? Those people below control the fate of us and every mutant. But soon, our fate will become theirs. Magneto looked sacred, as if he was doing something that would be a sin in the present but beneficial for generations to come. Well, actually I want to say that my fate is in my own hands. Besides, won't you take action? Tony finally couldn't listen anymore. Magneto looked at Tony, who was speaking in confusion, then turned his head and observed the surroundings. Who are you talking to? Are you trying to divert my attention? I advise you not to waste your energy. With a click, Magneto felt a pain in the back of his neck. Before he turned his head to see who was attacking him, he fainted. The speech is indeed very inspiring, and he has the potential to be a pyramid scheme leader. Scene looked at Magneto at his feet. Old people just lack sleep and fall asleep as soon as they lie down. Because Magneto fainted, all the metal objects that lost control began to fall, including Logan, who was controlled in the air and fell to the ground with a bang. Tony flew over in his battlesuit. Can you come earlier next time? He will strip my battlesuit clean in a while. Tony's words were very convincing now. There were gaps all over his battlesuit left by Magneto's control of metal objects, and some places were still emitting sparks. Didn't you ask me to cheer for you? I'm giving our Master Tony a chance to show off. Scene smiled as he looked at Tony's damaged battlesuit. What happened? Scott, who still had his eyes closed, couldn't figure out the situation at all. It's okay, it's solved. Jane explained to him what had just happened opposite him. Logan stepped forward to untie them one by one, and then looked around. Where's Mary? Where is she? Up there, at the top of the torch. I'll go and bring her down. Scene's cloak slowly floated up, and the whole person floated up to the top of the torch. There is a small room in the center of the torch, where little naughty Mary is imprisoned, together with the machine that Magneto is going to use to transform the leaders of various countries. Seeing the door in front of her suddenly open, little naughty Mary trembled all over. She thought it was Magneto and his men, but when she saw that the man who came in was a man wearing a black mask, she frowned at first, and then suddenly exclaimed, "You are Shadowman." "It's me, Jane. Aurora and Logan are downstairs. I'll take you down." Scene grabbed the iron ring that locked Mary's hands and broke it into two pieces with a little force. Mary was surprised again. She had also watched Shadowman's video on the internet, but she always felt that the content in the video was a bit too exaggerated. "Let's go." Scene stretched out his hand to take her down, but Mary hesitated. The mutant ability of the little naughty Mary is to absorb other people's mutant abilities or vitality through skin contact, which made her think she was a monster for a while. After coming to Charles's mutant school, she knew that this was a kind of mutant ability. There were many children with strange abilities in the school. So, when Scene stretched out his hand, she didn't dare to respond at all, because she was afraid that she would hurt Scene. Seeing that Mary was still hesitant, Scene reached out and grabbed her hand and walked out. You, what's wrong? Scene looked back at her. Just now, he did feel that there was a strange suction force on the little naughty body that was constantly demanding Scene's body through their hands. However, there are too many ways to stop this power for Scene. Even if he doesn't stop it, this power won't cause much harm to Scene. If this power absorbs the eternal fire in Scene's body, he even suspects that the eternal fire will burn Mary clean. However, this special mutant ability reminds Scene of martial arts in a martial arts novel he had read before. Chapter 88, Punishment, Real Punishment. Little naughty Mary looked at Scene holding her hand in surprise. Since she awakened her mutant ability, everyone she met had a bad ending. Except for Logan, who survived with his own strong self-healing ability. The others either died or were sucked into a cripple by her. This was the first time she had physical contact with someone, but the other person was fine. What was even more strange was that she herself did not feel the energy or vitality of others at all. Just like before she awakened, Mary missed this feeling of contact with people, and she couldn't help but start to touch Scene's big hand. "Although you touch very comfortably, should we go down?" Logan is already anxious and jumping 4 feet below. Scene said helplessly. This was the first time he was taken advantage of by a little girl. How to describe this feeling? Cool. U0027 U0027. I'm sorry. After hearing Scene's words, Mary realized what she had just done. Two red clouds appeared on her chubby white face, and she embarrassedly buried her head in the mountains that were already quite large. Scene floated up gently, and under the effect of the BO force field, Mary, who was holding his hand, also floated up slowly. Mary was shocked again with her eyes and mouth wide open. She didn't expect that she could actually fly, and she couldn't feel the invasion of cold air in the high altitude that should have been very cold. The wonderful experience made her look at Scene with a happy and excited face. Unfortunately, this wonderful journey did not last long. When the two of them landed on the ground at the bottom of the torch, Mary suddenly felt a little lost. "Mary, are you okay?" Logan was the first to run up and asked with concern. The two of them met in Canada. On the way, because Magneto wanted to catch the little rascal, they were rescued by Aurora and others to Charles's mutant academy. Then Logan encouraged Rogue to stay there. After all, he was a lone wolf. Later, because of the instigation of the students transformed by Mystique, Rogue left, and the battle at the station happened later. "I'm fine, Logan." Mary's feelings for Logan were more like family. After she awakened her ability and ran away from home, the first mutant she met was Logan. Others were focusing on something different from Logan. They were all looking at Mary and Scene's hands, which were still held together. Tony winked. "Brother, you're a fool." Scene rolled his eyes. "Get out. Didn't you see that she was holding me?" Jane looked at Scene with a strange expression. Scott's face was blocked by the laser mirror, and his expression could not be seen. Aurora was very straightforward. She pointed directly at the hands held by the two and asked, "Are you okay?" When Logan heard Aurora's question and saw the direction of her finger, he also looked at Scene and Mary with a surprised face. "What's the matter?" Scene answered casually. Tony was obviously still out of the situation. He didn't understand why Aurora asked this question, so he had a curious expression on his face. Anyone who has direct physical contact with Mary will be absorbed by her mutant ability. Once the contact lasts for a long time, the absorbed party may die directly. Aurora explained, while his eyes were still staring at the hands of the two who had not let go. "How long are you two going to hold hands? I also find it strange. I don't feel that I absorb other people's energy when I touch him," Mary said and put her other hand on, holding Scene's big hand with two small hands. "Okay, Mary, we all know. Let go." Logan's eyelids jumped. Why did he feel like an old father? Hearing Logan's words, Mary reluctantly let go of Scene's hand. She really hasn't felt normal contact with others for too long, and her little eyes kept looking at Scene. Tony, it's really a punishment. Brother, teach me later. Scene, what should we do now? Him and the machine above. Aurora pointed at Magneto, who was sleeping soundly on the ground. "Someone will come to clean it up. You don't have to worry about it," Scene said, and then opened a portal to the manor behind them. Not long after they left, a group of men in black appeared at the statue with a group of soldiers armed with live ammunition. They found the guards who were attacked in the museum and sent them to the ambulance. One of them suffered serious internal injuries, and even his ankle was broken and deformed. Phil Coulson walked out of the crowd and looked at Magneto, who was pointed at by several guns full of tranquilizer bullets on the ground. "Is he dead?" "No, sir, he just fainted." "Did he faint for so long?" "Yes, sir, maybe he was sleepy." Coulson looked at the agent, who answered him seriously with a look of "Are you kidding me?" and then waved his hand. "Take him away and separate him from the hairy monster in the water and the one without a tongue. This ability is a bit special." "Yes, sir." In Charles's manor, Scene and Tony were drinking coffee. Charles, who had already woken up, controlled the wheelchair and entered the room. King followed behind him. There was also a little head that kept looking inside in the corridor. When he saw Scene, his eyes lit up. "Oh, the child died, and you came to feed him." Scene complained, a little unhappy. It should be their own problem, but this guy was idle for so long and woke up only after the problem was solved. Hearing Scene's complaints, Charles was not angry and still looked calm and kind. "I really have to thank you for this matter. Let's talk about the reason for inviting us here. Besides, your coffee is really not good." Tony smacked his lips and put the cup in his hand on the table, then turned to look at Scene and waved his hand. Come on, brother, show them what coffee is. Do you think I'm a vending machine? Scene glared at this unreliable guy. Actually, Charles smiled as he watched the two bickering and then said the purpose of inviting the two to come in the first place point before. After they paid attention to the video of Shadowman on the internet, they suspected that Scene was a mutant. Although Scene's age was older than the students of the Mutant Academy, Charles still wanted to win him over. In addition to the strong strength Scene himself showed, there is also the social status and identity of Scene and Tony. Do you think I'm a mutant? Scene looked at Charles. It is very likely, isn't it? We can do a genetic test for you. Charles wanted to prove Scene's mutant identity so that it would be of great help to him to win over Scene. After all, everyone is the same kind. Then, I can only say that you think too much. I'm not a mutant, and my ability has nothing to do with mutants. Scene shook his head. Even if you are not, you have the power that does not belong to ordinary people like us. I have been committed to allowing humans and mutants to coexist harmoniously in this world. Isn't this a good thing for you? Charles said in a gentle tone. Scene frowned. He felt that Charles wanted to morally kidnap him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Twin Ponytails Gone. After coming out of the room, Tony glanced casually at Scene, who was standing not far away. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What's wrong, man? You don't really believe what that guy said, do you?" Tony was once a famous weapons manufacturer, and he knew all about the so-called leaders in the world. He has an account of these people's virtues and methods in his heart. Of course not. If I really believed it, I would have agreed to him without hesitation just now. Ideals are beautiful, but reality is often cruel and ruthless. I do admire people like Charles Xavier sincerely, but I can't do that kind of thing. Scene responded as he walked away slowly without looking back. Tony stared at Scene's retreating back, and for some reason, he felt that figure looked particularly lonely, completely different from the confident and flamboyant Scene he was familiar with on weekdays. He couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, "You are so young, and you talk like an old man." However, before he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "Hey, skinny old man, wait for me, let's go together." After saying that, Tony quickly chased after him. At this time, in the room, Kin, what do you think of Scene? Charles sat quietly on the chair and asked thoughtfully. He had obviously heard all the conversations between Scene and Tony outside. Kin was stunned when her name was suddenly called, feeling as if she had deserted class and being caught by the teacher, because just now Kin had been observing what Scene was doing after leaving the house through her own spiritual power. When she saw Scene meeting two female students from their college in the corridor, they were chatting happily. While they were laughing, Kin wanted to step in and ask what they were talking about. After Kin came back to his senses, he pondered for a moment and then said thoughtfully, "I think his strength is really very powerful. It's that unfathomable sense of power. It even makes me feel that he is even stronger than Magneto. It's so powerful that even you, the professor, may not be able to compete with it. But the strange thing is, despite being so powerful, this person gives me a very dull feeling. Perhaps it is because he is so powerful that his attitude toward everything that happens around him seems casual, as if it's as insignificant as looking at an ant." After listening to Kin's analysis, Charles nodded slightly, nodded in agreement, and then responded earnestly, "Well, you are absolutely right, kid. But you must not forget that if the elephant really wants to do it, if something happens, then just a random movement of its feet is enough to completely destroy the entire ant colony." Hearing Charles's meaningful words, Kin's face instantly turned pale. She looked at the door in surprise, her lips slightly opened, as if she wanted to say something, but didn't know how to express it. At this time, she was obviously so frightened by Charles' warning that even her voice began to tremble. "Professor, do you mean that he, facing Kin's worried eyes, Charles shook his head gently, patted her shoulder comfortingly, and said slowly, at least judging from the current situation, this elephant has not yet produced such a thing. Horrible thought. Before he finished speaking, Charles suddenly glanced at Kin beside him with an extremely obscure and complicated look. At this moment, another elephant with the same earth-shattering energy was sleeping quietly next to Charles in the bustling Queens, New York. Sunlight shines on the streets through the gaps between high-rise buildings. Oh, someone actually remembers to come back. Natasha's slightly teasing voice came, as if she had expected that scene would come back at this time. I saw her standing gracefully at the entrance of the corridor, with a graceful figure, like a blooming rose. With a relaxed smile on his face, Scene approached slowly with brisk steps. His eyes were involuntarily attracted to Natasha, especially when he saw Natasha's newly trimmed hairstyle. He couldn't help but chuckle. Why did you suddenly cut your hair? Isn't this a lot less fun? There seemed to be a little regret in the words. When Natasha heard this, the scene when Scene insisted on letting her wear double ponytails suddenly appeared in her mind. She immediately blushed and said coquettishly, "It's your pleasure, not mine." After that, she crossed her arms in front of her chest and rolled her eyes. At this time, Scene was unscrupulously admiring the beautiful scenery in front of him. Natasha's chest was slightly puffed out with her arms folded, just like a deep and charming canyon point. Just as he was looking at him intently, Natasha was keenly aware of his dishonest gaze, and the corners of her mouth on her originally calm face began to rise slightly. "Where's Manny? Are you at home?" Scene felt the change in the atmosphere and quickly changed the topic, looking away from Natasha and looking to the other side. When Natasha heard this, she couldn't help but complained, "I'm your housekeeper. There are 2 eggs hanging under the eyebrows. You can't see with just long eyes. Don't you have X-ray eyes?" After saying that, she twisted and angrily move over and ignore Scene. Fortunately, Scene knew how to appease this little female leopard. Just go straight up. Natasha, who was suddenly attacked by Scene, hit him on the chest with her small fists, but soon she started hugging Scene and responded enthusiastically. Bang bang bang. Natasha was awakened from her sleep by a rapid and loud knock on the door. She quickly stretched out her right hand like a conditioned reflex, trying to take out the pistol that was always by her side. However, when she grabbed the so-called weapon tightly, she instantly felt something strange in her hand. Natasha's heart tightened, and she looked carefully before she suddenly reacted. After realizing that she had grabbed the wrong thing, Natasha quickly let go of her hand, as if she had been electrocuted, and glared at Scene, who was sitting on the bed with a smile on his face. "Why didn't you open the door when you woke up?" Natasha questioned Scene, while glaring at him fiercely with her eyes. Scene glanced down calmly, and then slowly replied, "I'm not wearing any clothes." After that, he deliberately straightened his chest, as if showing his naked body to Natasha. Hearing this, Natasha was immediately furious. She retorted angrily, "I'm not wearing anything." Even so, she still complained, while quickly getting up from the bed, putting on her loose pajamas, and then walking towards the door in slippers. Natasha just walked to the door and stretched out her hand to open the door, but suddenly stopped. Chapter 90. Why don't you play by the rules? Natasha saw through the peephole on the door that it was Manny standing outside. She took a deep breath, adjusted herself, and then slowly opened the door. As soon as the door opened, before Natasha could speak, Manny couldn't wait to ask, "Natasha, I heard that Scene is back, right? I just knocked on his door, but no one responded. Is he here with you?" As she said that, Manny's eyes unconsciously fell on Natasha's slightly red face that had not yet completely faded. "He's here, you go in first." "Hey, wait." The messy scene on the floor of the room suddenly flashed in her mind, and Natasha quickly stretched out a hand to hold the door tightly. "What's wrong?" Manny looked at Natasha with a puzzled look. I'll let him find you later." Natasha smiled embarrassedly. Manny immediately understood her smile. Although both of them had acquiesced, this situation of being caught by the other party was still too much of a test of face. Then, "You ask him to come over for dinner." Manny said this and ran away. "Is that Manny? Why did she leave again?" Natasha heard Scene's question behind her. Just after she closed the door, she didn't answer, but glanced at the messy scene made by the two. "Well, it's not my fault. Someone said yesterday that he didn't feel any fun. Scene laughed jokingly. Shut up. Hurry up and put on your clothes and get out. Natasha, who was exposed, went berserk and directly pushed Scene, who was still disheveled, out of the room. The result was that Scene, who was half naked, stood in the corridor and looked directly into the eyes of Mary, who was secretly paying attention to the side at the other end of the corridor. Hi. Mary. Scene greeted shamelessly. Mary stared at Scene's muscular body that looked like a sculpture, and suddenly various images began to flash through her mind, and then she turned and walked into her room, but did not close the door. Looking at this reserved and implicit invitation, Scene followed in with his clothes. Scene didn't know what was going on between the two girls. They were supposed to be at loggerheads, but they were so tacitly in agreement that they both kept a default attitude towards each other's existence. However, this was a good thing for him. The only flaw was that the two of them were always unwilling to be in the same frame. Scene suddenly missed the days of studying Analects in Europe. Fortunately, he had a portal for this. Scene sincerely thanked Guyi for teaching him magic, but he didn't know what Guyi would think if he knew. Quiet and beautiful days always pass very quickly. On this day, Scene was watching a boring TV series at home. He received a call. Before answering the call, he looked at Natasha in his arms strangely, and then turned on the hands-free. Natasha is next to you, right? As soon as the call was connected, the voice of Nick Fury, the black salted egg, came from the receiver of the mobile phone. Yes, sir. Although it was strange, Natasha still responded in a formulaic way. Just now a vicious incident happened. Nick Fury paused, then continued. The president was assassinated. Natasha frowned immediately. She knew that if it was an ordinary assassination, Nick Fury would not call here at all. Is the situation serious? Natasha asked. The president is fine, just frightened. Then Natasha glanced at Scene and found that this guy was not listening at all. It was done by mutants. Nick Fury described the details of the president's assassination in detail on the phone. The assassin was a blue-skinned mutant with the ability to shift positions. He sneaked into the White House and almost no one could stop him. Just after he broke through the layers of guards and held the president hostage, he was shot by the presidential guard at a critical moment and then disappeared on the spot, leaving only a knife with a cloth strip with handwriting on it. Mutants want freedom. Listening to the content that was more threatening than assassination, Natasha guessed why Nick Fury called Scene. After Scene told her about the previous incident in which mutants targeted leaders of various countries, he reported it to Nick Fury, and Nick Fury also took corresponding countermeasures. Even if Magneto was not captured that day, Nick Fury had a backup plan. After the incident, Nick Fury probably thought that Scene had some personal relationship with those mutants, so he informed Scene in this way about the assassination of the president, hoping that Scene could participate. But Nick Fury didn't hear Scene's voice on the other side of the microphone, which surprised him. Scene, what, do you know something? Nick Fury asked. What can I know? I'm not a mutant. Then, what do you think of this assassination? Nick still didn't give up. I see with my eyes. Don't you realize the seriousness of this matter? If it is not handled properly, it is likely to trigger a war between mutants and humans. Nick Fury persuaded from a different angle. Then, why don't you just handle it? Isn't that what you do? Hey, what you said makes sense. Nick Fury was speechless. If you don't help, I'll let Agent Romanoff go. Nick Fury said in a tough tone. Can I understand that you are threatening me? Scene's tone changed instantly, and even Natasha beside him shuddered. How can this be called a threat? Just tell me if Natasha is my agent, and if it is an emergency now, should I send her on a mission? Nick Fury's attitude was still tough, but his voice was getting lower and lower, which was not very convincing. Well, what you said makes sense. Then send her. What the hell? Why don't you play by the rules? Hearing Scene's answer, Nick Fury was stunned. Isn't this different from what was agreed? Shouldn't you worry about Natasha and take the initiative to take on this mission? Those who were threatened by me before were all this routine. Natasha also stared at Scene with her eyes wide open. She knew Nick Fury's methods very well. But you are stubborn. Anything else? If not, I'll hang up. The male and female protagonists in the TV show are about to kiss, and I need to learn Scene hung up the phone without giving Nick Fury a chance to speak. Listening to the busy tone on the phone, Nick Fury's one eye almost popped out of his eye socket. Damn it. After a second of silence, Nick Fury threw the phone to the ground. Just as Nick Fury returned to his true nature of fuck man, Natasha looked at Scene worriedly. You really not going to intervene? Assassinating the president is not the goal, otherwise they wouldn't use a knife. Even if mutants have all kinds of abilities, guns are better tools than knives in most cases. You mean the people behind the scenes hope to get something through the assassination? Natasha thought along the lines of Scene's words. You can pay attention to those people who suddenly appeared after the assassination. Hey, what are you doing? Okay. Scene took Natasha into his arms again. He just learned a new trick from a TV show, and now he plans to try it out with Natasha. Chapter 91 Current Crime. As Scene tells it, after the president's assassination, he summoned two people in his White House office, where the layers of protection had been rearranged. One is Colonel William Stryker of the military, the other is Senator Kelly, who should have died under Magneto's transformation machine, or Mystique, who turned into Senator Kelly. Because of the assassination incident, the president became aware of the threat of mutants and his attitude towards mutants also changed. At this time, someone mentioned William Stryker's name to him. William Stryker has been dealing with mutants for a long time, and his son Jason is a mutant. Most ordinary parents think it is a disease when their children develop mutant abilities, and William Stryker is no exception. He once approached Charles because of his son, hoping that Charles could cure Jason. Unfortunately, Charles does not think mutant genes are a disease. What he hopes is to help guide all mutants to use their mutant abilities safely and correctly, so that they can integrate into this society. After that, Jason, who still couldn't control his abilities well, kept creating various illusions in the minds of his father, William Stryker, and his mother, causing his mother to drill into her own body with an electric drill. The head, just to stop those phantom images. The death of his wife and the mutation of his son made William Stryker hate mutants extremely. In the following time, he has been committed to various researches on mutant abilities. Wolverine Logan's adamant alloy claws were made under his experiments. Later, William Stryker finally discovered a way to kill all mutants once and for all. Professor X's brainwave enhancement device. The brainwave enhancement device can enhance Charles's psychic abilities, allowing him to establish a link with everyone in the world. But once this link exceeds a certain energy value, it can kill the other party. After Charles's psychic ability is enhanced by the brainwave enhancement device, he can accurately screen out all the mutants in the world and establish a psychic link with them at the same time. As long as Charles increases the output of his psychic ability, he can reach a certain level of energy. When the value is reached, all mutants will be killed directly. This assassination was secretly controlled by William Stryker in order to obtain authority from the president to lead the army into Charles' estate reasonably and legally and take away what he wanted. After receiving the president's approval in the White House office, William Stryker left with great satisfaction and started preparing for a raid on Xavier Academy for the gifted without stopping. At this moment, Charles doesn't know what will happen to his adorable mutant children. Queens, New York. Okay, I understand. Natasha hung up the phone and walked into the house. Her brows have not relaxed since she received the call just now. He walked to the sofa absent-mindedly, curled up his legs, and hugged his whole body, and nestled into the soft sofa. Natasha was thinking about what Scene had said to her before, combined with the news she had just received from the White House, that Colonel William Stryker should be the mastermind behind the assassination. So what is the real purpose of William Stryker? Thinking of this, Natasha immediately jumped off the sofa, opened the door, and ran to Scene's door. Scene opened the door after hearing a knock on the door. He hurriedly got in and closed the door behind his back. Natasha thought she wanted to open it. Who knew that before Scene could make a move, Natasha said, this assassination of the president was ordered by a colonel named William Stryker, who has been working on mutant experiments for many years. Just now, the White House has authorized William Stryker to conduct a series of arrests against mutants. Capture and torture operation. If there is anyone with a vested interest in this assassination operation, it is this guy. But is this William Stricker just for this result? Even if the president does not express it, he has done a lot secretly in recent years. Natasha finished her speculation in one breath, and then looked at Scene curiously, understanding Natasha's purpose. Although a little disappointed, Scene poured her a glass of water, then sat down and said, William Stricker should be here for the brainwave enhancement device in Xavier Academy for Geniuses. When Scene met Kin and the others last time, he heard her talking about this brainwave enhancement device, and felt that he had forgotten something. Later, he remembered that this thing was a big killer. Then he thought that only a powerful psychic operator like Charles could fully exert the effect of the brainwave amplification device, and Scene could resist Charles' psychic abilities, so he didn't pay too much attention. Now that this assassination incident has occurred, and if this guy named William Stricker is behind the scenes, then his purpose must be that the brainwave enhancement device has not escaped. Brainwave enhancement device? What is that? Scene explained to Natasha the function of the brainwave enhancement device, and Natasha's pretty face changed color instantly. Didn't you tell me earlier that mutants had such powerful weapons? I only remembered it later. Besides, the requirements for using this thing are too high. There is probably only Charles in the world. What's more, I don't think there is anything powerful about it. Scene looked a little disdainful expression. If she couldn't beat the guy in bed or out of bed, Natasha would let him know who is the boss. You are good, but not everyone is like you. Natasha kicked him in anger, but Scene grabbed her hand. Natasha was absent-minded and didn't notice Scene's action at all. I have to report this to the director. Natasha took out her phone and called Nick Fury. Sir, I have something important to report to you. Agent Romanoff, what's the important situation? Nick Fury was a little confused. Why did he stop talking? Natasha, this is what happened. Natasha forced herself to report her speculation on the entire assassination and the matter of the brainwave enhancer. Nick Fury didn't react when he heard the previous intelligence, but when he heard the function of the brainwave enhancer, he clenched his fist. He didn't expect that the mutants actually had such a weapon. The most important thing is that it can not only target mutants, but also all humans. As for the requirements for the use of the brainwave enhancer, Nick Fury has automatically ignored it. In the eyes of this top agent, even if no one can use it, the mere existence of the brainwave enhancer can be considered a threat. After a brief thought, Nick Fury has made a decision. Natasha, sir, you say. I'm listening. What the hell are you listening to? I haven't said anything yet. You don't want to hide it from people now, right? Am I also a part of your play? Nick Fury noticed that the atmosphere on the other end of the phone was a little wrong, very similar to the embarrassing content he had eavesdropped on several times before. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, but now he had to ask for help. Natasha, turn on the hands-free. Chapter 92. Who is the good person who smokes cigars? After hanging up the phone with Natasha and Scene, Nick Fury's face couldn't be any darker. He looked down, and suddenly a feeling of powerlessness came over him, and he collapsed on the chair. He had just reached a deal with Scene. Scene helped him destroy the brainwave enhancer in Xavier's School of Geniuses, and he also had to warn the mutants not to allow such things to appear again, and the existing data would be collected, blocked, and destroyed by Nick Fury himself. Thinking of what he had just experienced, Nick Fury felt like, I'm tired, let's destroy it. On the other side, Natasha glared at Scene, who was grinning beside her, with an angry face, raised her hand and slapped him hard on the shoulder. Look at what you have done. She gritted her teeth in anger, wishing she could dig a big hole in the ground and hide in it. However, in the face of Natasha's anger, Scene didn't care at all, but grinned with a frivolous smile. To him, Natasha's seemingly fierce slap was just a gentle caress full of love. Of course it's you, HMM. Suddenly, he didn't react to what Scene said, and when Natasha came to her senses, she stared at this guy with her beautiful eyes. After the rain and clouds disappeared, Natasha lay on Scene's chest and drew circles. How do you plan to deal with the brainwave enhancer? Do you have a specific action plan? Natasha asked. Scene seemed to be indifferent, and responded casually, does this matter need a plan? Just blow it up. After saying that, He shrugged indifferently. Hearing this, Natasha raised her head with difficulty, stared at Scene, and cursed in her heart. You fucking. Forget it. You are awesome. Okay, what? About the mutant problem? How can we ensure that they will not rebuild a brainwave enhancer in the future? Scene gently stroked Natasha's delicate skin and replied, this is also simple. There are only two people who understand how this thing works. One is Charles, also known as Professor X. The other is Eric, also known as Magneto. As for Charles, just tell him honestly, he will know how to choose. As for Magneto, if he refuses to listen, then beat him up until he listens. Scene's tone was relaxed and casual, as if he was talking about how to discipline two naughty children next door. Natasha listened to Scene's words silently, and couldn't help feeling a little emotional. At this moment, she suddenly began to miss the days when she was an agent on missions. At least at that time, the enemies she faced were normal ordinary humans. Since she met Scene, there have been few normal things around her. Thinking of this, she was furious and stretched out her hand to pinch him hard. Scene, who was attacked in the vitals, looked at Natasha in shock. Huh? You recovered so quickly today. Natasha's heart skipped a beat when she noticed Scene's look. Shit. Run. Natasha jumped out of Scene's arms before she could even put on her clothes. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't fly out of the five-finger mountain of Buddha. Looking at the creepers on the courtyard wall and the gate of Xavier School of Geniuses in front of him, Scene didn't expect that he would be back so soon. Is it really you? Why are you here? Kin trotted from the manor to the gate and looked at Scene in front of her in surprise. She thought she was hallucinating when she saw Scene's figure in the monitoring system of the gate just now. Scene's mood was much better when he was greeted by a beautiful woman. He decided to have a good talk with them first. I came to see you. Kin was certainly not one of those young and ignorant girls. She didn't think that Scene really came to see her on purpose, but when she heard Scene say that, her heart still rippled. The professor is not here now. You should come in first. Kin raised her hand to tidy up her hair. Scene had already noticed that Kin had changed her hairstyle. He nodded and followed Kin along the stone road to the manor, praising her new look. Just as the two were talking and laughing, a voice came over. What are you doing here? Hearing this questioning tone, Scene looked at Scott in front of him and suddenly wanted to demolish it directly. Scott, after being scolded by Kin, Scott turned around and left with a gloomy face. Scott has been in trouble recently because of the mutant assassination, so Kin explained to Scene and then continued to invite him in. Don't worry, there is another person. Scene turned and looked at the gate. Soon, Kin, who was puzzled, sensed the other person Scene was talking about. The lone wolf riding a motorcycle and smoking a cheap cigar. After parking the motorcycle, Logan, wearing his leather jacket, walked towards the two people with a backpack. When he saw Kin, his wolf eyes lit up. Ah, you welcoming me? Logan smiled confidently, stretched out his hand to clamp the cheap cigar in his mouth, took a deep breath and spit it out. Seeing Logan like that, I couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Who would smoke cigars through their lungs? This is just relying on his own self-healing ability to do whatever he wants. Although Scene's body can do the same thing, he always feels that, even if he doesn't have the self-healing ability, Logan can do such a thing. I came out to pick up Scene. He told me that you were back too. Jane's words instantly made Logan's good mood plummet. Let's go in first. I have something to say. Sean took the lead and walked in, as if he was the owner of this place. The three figures attracted a lot of attention in the corridor inside the house, especially the two little girls Mary and Katie. When they saw Logan, Mary was surprised for a moment, and then saw Sean, and the two little girls were immediately surprised. Still in Charles' office, Sean felt the two girls peeking out in the corridor outside, shook his head, and smiled. Later, Aurora closed the door of the office and walked to the table while saying, Jane said you have something to tell us. Seeing Aurora dressed in a white tight-fitting top, Sean suddenly felt that his eyes were bright. This black girl seemed not bad. You already know about the mutant assassination, so I won't say much. I came here today for something. Sean also went straight to the point. What is it? Aurora and Jane looked at each other, encephalostoid. Scene uttered a few words. What do you want it for? Who do you want to find? But no one uses it except the professor, and the professor is not in the academy now. Kin looked puzzled. He thought Scene was going to use the brainwave enhancer to find someone. Scene calmly shook his head and said something that shocked Kin and Ororo. I'm going to destroy it. Chapter 93 Impossible. Why? Ororo's eyes widened, her face full of confusion and disbelief. Her delicate face was slightly distorted by astonishment at this moment, staring at Scene in front of her, as if she wanted to find a trace of joking on his face. Is this a joke? Kin, who was standing beside her, also showed a look of shock, with a bit of tentativeness in her tone. She bit her lips lightly and clenched the corners of her clothes unconsciously with both hands. However, Scene looked directly at the Toledo's expressionlessly, his eyes firm and without any intention of retreating. I'm not joking. Scene's voice was low and powerful, like a heavy hammer hitting the hearts of the two. Ororo and Kin looked at each other and saw shock and confusion in each other's eyes, but in the face of Scene's affirmative attitude, they had to believe that Scene really intended to destroy the brainwave enhancer. Impossible. I will never let you do this. Ororo stood up straight suddenly. She was originally half leaning on the desk, but now she was like an angry white-haired lion. Seeing this, Kin also moved her feet and quickly stood beside Ororo. Although she was also full of doubts in her heart, she chose to support Ororo's decision at this moment. However, she still racked her brains and couldn't figure out why Scene insisted on destroying the brainwave enhancer. Why do you have to destroy it? Kin couldn't help asking again, with a little anxiety in her voice. Scene reached out and pulled a chair in front of him and then sat down. He knew in his heart that in this atmosphere, the other party would probably not have the leisure to invite him to sit down. Do you really know all the functions of the brainwave enhancer? Scene leaned back leisurely on the chair, his eyes swept from bottom to top and swept over Kin, Ororo, and Logan, who was standing aside with a blank face and a cigar in his mouth. After hearing this, Jane and Ororo turned their heads and looked at each other. As for the function of the brainwave enhancer, they really only knew that this thing was a tool Charles used to find mutants. Obviously, the question raised by Scene made them speechless for a moment, and they didn't know how to answer. And Scene naturally took in all of this, and he knew very well in his heart that the Toledos in front of him really knew nothing about the other uses of the brainwave enhancer. Scene stretched out his hand slowly, gently straightened his sleeves, and then slowly said, in fact, this brainwave enhancer was originally developed by Eric, the famous Magneto, and your beloved Professor X, Charles. At that time, Charles' original intention was to use this instrument to enhance his own spiritual ability and then to successfully build a spiritual connection with everyone in the world. Jane and Ororo also nodded. These are all things they know, but once Charles increases the energy output of the mind link against a certain person or a certain group, this powerful mind power can directly kill his linked object. When Scene's words reached the ears of the three people present, their expressions instantly changed. The first one was Kin. After listening to Scene's words, she stood there blankly, her eyes a little empty. As a person who also has psychic abilities, she is very familiar with everything about this power, and she is thinking about how likely Scene is soon. She figured out that the brainwave enhancer is indeed very likely to do what Scene said. Moreover, if she were not subject to strict restrictions on the use of the brainwave enhancer, I'm afraid that even she herself could use this instrument to take the lives of others. Ororo's face was full of disbelief. She stared at Scene with her eyes wide open and kept saying, impossible. This is absolutely impossible. For Ororo, the professor has always been the amiable, wise and just leader, and she doesn't believe that the professor would do such a cruel thing as killing. At the same time, she was deeply skeptical about the fact that the brainwave enhancer was such a powerful weapon. Finally, it was Logan. After hearing the news, his brows quickly wrinkled into a ball. However, just a moment later, when he recalled Charles's daily behavior and noble character, Logan's frown slowly relaxed. He believed that, even if Charles really had such ability, he would never do such a crazy act. What evidence do you have? What basis do you have to say that? Ororo asked back with her hands on her hips. In her opinion, Scene might have learned the information about the brainwave enhancer from somewhere, but what Scene said later, even her senior teacher in the academy didn't know, so Scene was even less likely to know. Regarding the question of whether the brainwave enhancer has this function, you can ask your good friend, the psychic Jane. As for Charles, I also believe that he will not do such a thing, but do you think others will believe it? Can't you help keep this secret? Logan said something for Jane because he found that Jane's expression had confirmed that what Scene said was true. I'm not the one you should worry about. Scene realized that they hadn't realized where the problem was before Scene finished speaking. Jane asked, "You mean Magneto? He shouldn't tell this secret." Aurora said this without confidence because Magneto was not in the same camp as them. Even if he doesn't say it, don't you think others can't force him to say it? Scene spread his hands. Yes, Magneto is now locked up. If someone tortures him, Jane realized the seriousness of the problem and immediately took out her phone to contact Scott. He left to find the professor before, and they were about to visit the place where Magneto was imprisoned. How is it? Aurora looked at Jane with a nervous look after she finished talking to Scott. He said he would tell the professor. Jane looked at Scene a little unnaturally. She had a feeling that Scott didn't believe what Scene said. In fact, Jane's idea was correct. After Scott learned that the source of this information was Scene, he disdainfully threw it behind his mind. In Scott's heart, he was the captain of the X-Men and Charles' most trusted student. He believed that the professor would never hide these things from them, so in his opinion, Scene was just talking nonsense. What should we do now? Aurora pulled Jane's arm and whispered in her ear. She was afraid that Scene would rush directly. With the strength Scene showed before, I'm afraid that several people combined would not be enough for him to warm up. Not to mention that this is still in the college, and there are so many students and children. Can calm down a little. If Scene wanted to take action directly, he could have done it when he first came. Since they are still in the office now, the situation is not that bad. Scene. Kin patted Aurora's hand to signal her to calm down and turned to look at Scene. Where did you find out about this? Scene stood up from the chair. Seeing his movements, Aurora was so nervous that she almost had cataracts and struck him with lightning. I know you won't believe it so easily, but you will have the answer soon. Chapter 94. I really want to see your train of thought. Before coming to Xavier Academy for the Gifted, Scene had learned from Natasha that William Stryker had visited the imprisoned Magneto Eric Point. Although the surveillance equipment failed to capture the specific content of their exchange, Magneto was in a very awkward situation after William Stryker left, and it seemed that William Stryker was not very friendly to him. William Stryker may have succeeded in getting the information he wanted from Magneto. Next. His target is naturally Xavier Academy for Geniuses, or the brainwave enhancement device built under the Academy. Sure enough, it didn't take long before some abnormalities began to emerge. According to the scheduled plan, Scott and Charles were supposed to return to the college smoothly before evening. However, as time passed by, their return was never seen, and not even the slightest news was transmitted. The anxious Kin tried to call Scott's number, but the response she received was a cold shutdown tone. An ominous premonition suddenly came to mind. Kin knew that the situation was serious and there was no need to delay. So she made a prompt decision, and together with Aurora found Scene, who was chatting leisurely with Mary and Katie. After Aurora made 2 excuses and successfully dismissed the 2 reluctant little guys, Kin could no longer suppress the anxiety in her heart and walked straight to Scene, staring into his eyes and speaking urgently. Said, "Scott and the professor have lost contact." After hearing this, Scene closed his eyes and listened for a while, but before finding the voices of Scott and Charles, he heard some unusual movement outside the manor. "I think it's not the 2 of you that you should worry about now." Scene opened his eyes and looked down at Kin and said, "There are armed helicopters flying towards your college, and they are all well-trained soldiers." Kin's pupils shrank immediately after hearing the news. At this moment, Aurora, who had left, also came back. Kin immediately informed her that a group of well-trained soldiers were approaching here. Having seen Scene's ability in the previous Ellis Island incident, Aurora had no doubts. What do these people want to do? I'm going to find Logan now, Aurora said angrily, her tone full of murderous intent. It seemed that she was planning to have a head-on confrontation with Logan. Wait, Aurora. King called out to stop Aurora, who was about to go on a killing spree. The most important thing now is these children. When he heard children, Aurora, who was full of anger, felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on him. Is it possible that we just let them in like this? Aurora still wanted to use force. Scene, can you help us? Kin turned her head and looked at the leisurely scene with a pleading expression. Sure, Kin and Aurora were immediately happy, but Scene's next words made the smiles on their faces freeze again. The premise is that I destroy the brainwave enhancement device first. Aurora was suddenly in trouble. She wanted Scene to help them, but she didn't want Scene to do anything to the professor's brainwave enhancement device. Point compared with Aurora, Kin is very clear. She knows that with Scene's strength, he can directly destroy the brainwave enhancement device without their permission. Being able to tell them this now is just to save face. Moreover, once those well-trained soldiers really broke in, under the suppression of numbers, even if they moved all the children, and with Logan's help, there was no guarantee that she would be able to escape unscathed. At this time, no one in this manner can stop Scene. After analyzing the pros and cons, King quickly made a decision. I agree. Aurora looked at Kin, who made a sound in surprise. She was planning to have a fight with Logan. It's not necessary, Aurora. The end result is the same. Not to mention that this is the best thing for us. Maybe the loss of contact between the professor and Scott is also related to the group of people who are coming soon. After hearing Kin talk about the professor and Scott, Aurora calmed down. After hesitating for a few seconds, she had no choice but to compromise. The two of them took Scene to the underground of the manor, passing through the brightly lit corridor, and at the end was the location of the brainwave enhancement device. Scene looked at the big X pattern on the door and the technologically advanced iris fingerprint lock in the center with a clang. A 3-pointed knife suddenly appeared in his hand and was inserted into the door without reaching the handle. Scene's arm holding the 3-pointed knife flicked and drew a circle on the door. After retracting the 3-pointed knife, Scene raised his foot and tapped the door with the anti-theft system turned off. Suddenly, the entire door fell inward along the circle that Scene had just drawn and fell to the ground. Looking at all the facilities inside, Scene showed no interest at all. He directly lit the golden red eternal fire, and even the door was burned clean in an instant. Kin and Aurora, who were standing behind him, were shocked and regretful as they looked at all of Scene's movements and the huge black hole that was burned by the fire in front of them. The two looked at each other, their faces filled with tears. Have no choice. After the three of them solved the brainwave enhancement device, they waited until late at night. Aurora was almost a little suspicious when they waited, and then they discovered a group of well-trained soldiers wearing night vision goggles and tranquilizer guns, and began to enter the manor. Logan and Aurora lurked in a room in the corridor. They still planned to take action themselves. Kin and Scene were waiting directly in Charles' office. After dealing with the two who jumped in from the window, Scene continued to chat with Kin, who looked worried. Don't worry, with their skills, even if they can't beat them, they can retreat here, Scene said while playing with Charles' spare wheelchair in the office. Charles usually uses his mental power to control the wheelchair, but he also installed a mechanical joystick on the wheelchair. Logan's howling was ringing in the corridor outside, but the sound was obviously very happy. Scene sat in the wheelchair and began to circle around Kin. Does it look like Charles' usual class? Scene asked with a smile. Kin looked at Scene with a little dizziness. This guy's really not in a hurry at all, but after Scene's trouble, she is not so worried now. If you shave all your hair and get older, maybe it will look a bit like him, Kin said with a sullen smile. Have you ever heard of a saying, I've become stronger and bald? Scene stopped and turned his wheelchair to face Kin, with his back to the door. Do you think I need to become bald now that I'm so strong? Besides, with Charles's looks, he can only barely compete with me when he's young. I'm definitely much more handsome than him when I'm old. Kin, sometimes I really want to use my psychic ability to see how your brain circuits are and what you're thinking about. Kin was a little helpless. It was the first time she met someone whose thoughts were completely invisible. When You start to feel curious about a man, you're likely to fall in love with him in the end. Are you sure you want to know what I'm thinking? Scene tilted his head. Kin's face flushed for a moment. Then she gave Scene a charming look and continued to pay attention to the fight outside the door. Bang. Chapter 95. Do you have donkey hair in your ears? Just as the two were talking happily, suddenly, the office door made a loud noise. It turned out that several well-trained soldiers with uniform movements worked together to knock it open. However, these intruders did not even have time to pull the trigger before they encountered a fatal attack. The cold and sharp wolf claws stabbed door scratched them at lightning speed, taking their lives in an instant. In an instant, blood splashed on the wooden door and the surrounding walls like a fountain, forming a horrifying picture. Logan, who had just finished killing, had his chest heaving violently and gasping for breath, like a beast that had just experienced a fierce battle. His claws, which had not yet been retracted, kept dripping with bright red blood, gathering into a pool of blood on the ground. The whole room was filled with a strong smell of rust, which made people feel sick. At this time, Scene, who had been sitting in a wheelchair, held his chin with both hands and admired the wild and powerful lone wolf in front of him with interest. He smiled and teased, "I have to say, you are really handsome now, but there is no need to keep it for so long, right?" Hearing this, Logan shook his hand unhappily, and more blood splashed all over the floor, like blooming red plums. Kin, who was standing by, saw the carpet soiled by Logan, but she was not angry. Instead, she smiled and said with gloating, "When the professor comes back, I will definitely turn you into a 6-year-old little girl." Hearing this, Logan first raised his chin proudly, showing his disdain, but then he shuddered, as if he thought of something terrible. He shrugged his nose and asked uncertainly, "Can he really do it?" After all, he was still afraid of Charles's unimaginably powerful mind control ability. "Of course," Kin said jokingly. Before Logan could reply, he heard a rush of footsteps coming from far away, and then Ororo's slender and agile figure appeared at the other end of the corridor. In sharp contrast to Logan, who was covered in blood and looked quite embarrassed, Ororo was almost spotless and looked particularly neat and tidy. Ororo ran to the crowd with an anxious face and said loudly, "There are more and more of them." Although her expression was very urgent, if you look closely, you will find that there is a subtle excitement in her beautiful eyes. It seems that she had a good fight just now. Hearing Ororo's words, Logan quickly turned his head and his eyes fell on Scene. In the previous battle, Logan had been hit by several anesthetic needles. If he did not have a strong self-healing physique, he would have fallen to the ground and been captured. However, the number of enemies is still increasing, and the situation is beginning to be unfavorable to them. Although Logan is reckless, he is not stupid. At the same time, Kin and Ororo also cast their eyes towards Scene. Their eyes seemed to say, "It's your turn to take action, right? Are you trying to cheat?" Facing the gazes of the three people, Scene seemed to have heard nothing and continued to stare quietly outside the door. Following Scene's gaze, I saw an obese old man with a big pot belly who was being closely protected by a group of fully armed soldiers, slowly approaching the office. The old man had a pair of thick glasses on his nose, and the eagle eyes behind the lenses were greedily staring at Logan in the office. With a complex expression on his face, 3 parts of surprise and 7 parts of pride. "Wolverine, this is really surprising. I didn't expect to see you here. It's been so many years, and you are still as lively and wild as before." William Stricker walked in the middle of a group of soldiers with small steps. The tone of his mouth was like reuniting with an old friend who had not seen each other for many years. With the corpses scattered in the corridor and the blood flowing all over the ground, the whole scene seemed so weird. "Who are you?" Logan heard the man call the name on the military badge hanging around his neck, and he also felt that the old man who suddenly appeared was very familiar. He tried hard to recall, but still couldn't find a trace of connection with the person in front of him from the incomplete memory. However, although Logan had lost his previous memories, he just hated William Stricker for no reason, especially after seeing the obscene smile on his face. He wanted to use the claws that sprang out of his knuckles to pierce William Stricker's layered chin directly into his entire head. "Is it because it's been so long that you've forgotten? Or is it because I'm old and you're still so young?" William Stricker grinned at Logan, who was confused. His fat face was piled up because of his smile, and he looked a little creepy. "Who are you?" Logan growled, his muscles tensed. If William Stricker's answer didn't satisfy him, he was going to ask himself. Kakakaka. A burst of gunfire sounded, and the soldiers around William Stricker sensed Logan's threat and aimed at him. "Oh, don't get excited. The current situation is not under your control." William Stricker proudly shook his fat head and ears and spread his hands to indicate to Logan the tranquilizer gun ready to go. After a brief anger, Logan suddenly relaxed and calmed down. He took a deep breath, and an inexplicable smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Seeing Logan suddenly give up resistance, William Stricker felt something was wrong, but he couldn't tell. Is this still the Wolverine in his impression? Has he changed? Anyway, let's catch him first. William Stricker waved his hand and ordered his men, then turned around confidently and planned to leave to find his real goal of coming to Xavier College this time. "Where are you going?" Just after William Stricker turned around, Logan's voice came from behind him. William Stricker smiled triumphantly when he heard this voice. "You are a gift. Of course I have to find my reward. Don't leave." Logan's voice came again, which made William Stricker a little dissatisfied. "What's wrong with these guys? They are so slow. It seems that the people below have to be rectified after they go back. Hey, do you have donkey hair in your ears, you?" William Stricker finally couldn't stand it anymore, turned around and prepared to talk back, and saw a scene that stunned him. All the people he brought with him were lying on the ground, and the people in the office were looking at him jokingly. William Stricker's face became more and more ugly. He was still talking to Logan about the current situation in the last second, and the next second there was a big reversal. At the same time, his fat brain was working fast. What happened? Who made the move? Before coming here, William Stricker had already studied several people in Xavier's School of Geniuses. Except for Charles, who had been captured by him, there was absolutely no other mutant who had such ability. After scanning Jane, Aurora and Logan one by one, William Stricker focused his eyes on scene, and he looked at the new face sitting in the wheelchair. Could it be him? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Ackley Lake. Logan, catch that guy and let Jane see what kind of garbage is in his pig brain. Scene said indifferently with a blank expression, as if everything that happened in front of him had nothing to do with him. After hearing Scene's words, Logan's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing an intriguing smile, and he was seen approaching William Stricker step by step. With every step, the mocking smile on his face became stronger. William Stricker looked at Logan, who was approaching him step by step with a smile on his face, in horror. Without the protection of his men, he was just an old man half buried in the soil. You. William Stricker moved his body backwards and tried to escape. His hands were still constantly groping for weapons on his body, but at this moment he didn't carry any weapons at all. Even if he had weapons in his hands, how could he be Logan's opponent with his strength? After all, that was the super soldier he had personally endowed with an almost indestructible adamantium skeleton. Seeing Logan getting closer and closer to him, William Stricker was extremely anxious. In a panic, he subconsciously stretched out his hands to stop Logan from moving forward, but just as his hands touched Logan's body, he was grabbed by Logan's wrists. With a shrill scream, William Stricker raised his right hand in pain, and cold sweat suddenly broke out on his greasy face. It turned out that Logan had directly broken William Stricker's bones. The screams continued, and the severe pain caused William Stricker to kneel on the ground in an instant. The sparse white hair on his head was now soaked with sweat. Logan grabbed his wrist, dragged William Stricker's fat body to Kin, and threw it hard. Looking at William Stricker, who rolled to his feet with his teeth almost broken, Kin still had some hesitation on her face. "What's wrong?" Scene looked at the red-haired beauty who was hesitant to take action. "My psychic ability has been very unstable recently. If the other party doesn't cooperate, it may be," Jane said nervously. Before Jane finished speaking, she was interrupted by Aurora. "It's okay, there are so many on the ground. If he doesn't cooperate, just change one. Aurora pointed to the soldiers on the ground. Logan also said lightly beside him, don't add psychological pressure. If something happens, just think that I killed him. As he said that, he raised his hand and clenched his fist to eject his adamantium claw. That won't be so serious, but he may become a fool. Jane explained seriously. With a sneer. Logan put away his claws. That's a bargain for him. Scene. Stood up and patted Jane on the shoulder. Just treat it as a scientific experiment. Show us. Teacher Jane Grey. Jane rolled his eyes at him unhappily. William Stricker, who was lying on the ground with his wrist covered and sweating all over, suddenly changed his face when he heard the conversation between several people. Doesn't anyone care about my opinion? Logan picked up William Stricker like a fat chicken so that Kin could operate it conveniently. Kin closed her eyes and concentrated her attention and began to mobilize her mental power. She thought she would encounter great resistance, but she didn't expect William Stricker's brain to be defenseless. Pictures flashed in Kin's mind, and the huge amount of information made her feel a little swollen and painful in her brain, and her face changed slightly. Seeing Kin's somewhat painful look, Scene reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. Kin immediately felt a warm energy flowing through her body. Her frown slowly loosened, and her face slowly became calm. I know the whereabouts of the professor. Kin opened her eyes confidently and said to everyone, the assassination of the president was planned by his right hand, and the purpose was to get the action permit so that he could break into our college and get the brainwave enhancer. Kin looked at William Stricker in front of him with resentment. She had just seen a lot of human experiments on mutants in his mind, including Logan. This William Stricker was simply a butcher executioner. After a brief discussion, they decided to go to Lake Ackley where the professor was imprisoned immediately. There were many of their fellow mutants imprisoned in the military base below. After learning the exact location, Scene directly opened a portal, which surprised William Stricker, who was controlled by Logan next to him. In fact, the reason why William Stricker cooperated with Kin was that he wanted them to go to Lake Ackley. After all, that was his base camp, and he had a secret weapon. Only by going there could he have a chance to turn over with Kin's guidance and Scene's mobile portal. They entered the military base under Lake Ackley without any obstruction. However, after entering the base, the surveillance cameras everywhere caused them a lot of trouble. After dealing with several waves of people who came to die, William Stricker finally realized that it was impossible to deal with Scene and his men with these ordinary people. He could only shout at his men to stop attacking and take them directly to Professor X's detention place. The moment the prison door was opened, William Stricker immediately shouted, "Eureka!" A gray agile figure quickly rushed out and pounced on Logan, who was holding William Stricker hostage. William Stricker's men who followed them also drew their guns and fired at Scene, Jane and Aurora. However, before those people drew their guns, golden red flames suddenly ignited on their bodies. In just a moment, they were burned to ashes, as if they had never existed. William Stricker, who was out of control, had a terrified face. He didn't know what that was. He had studied so many mutants, but he had never seen such an ability. However, his reaction was still very quick. He shouted directly to Charles's cell, "Jason, control them all." Just when Jane and Aurora wanted to attack William Stricker, they stood still at the same time. Even Logan, who was fighting with Eureka next to him. "Okay, Eureka." William endured the pain in his wrist and gritted his teeth to give orders to Eureka, who still wanted to continue attacking Logan. Eureka, wearing a capable gray suit, immediately stood still obediently, like a robot. Seeing that he had regained control of the situation, William Stricker couldn't help but laugh like a villain. He first glanced at Logan, who was standing still, then turned to look at Scene, Wolverine, and this new mutant who suddenly appeared. What was that golden red flame just now? William Stricker said to himself. That's called the Eternal Fire. Oh, what is that? William Stricker heard the answer and immediately asked with a puzzled look on his face, but he didn't realize until halfway through his words. Who is answering his words? Seeing William Stricker looking around, Scene waved his hand. "What are you looking for? Here, you. How could you?" Chapter 97, Beheading and Beheading Again. What about me? Why am I not immersed in an illusion? Right. Scene's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a mocking smile. Scene did not explain to him, but opened the heavy black prison iron door. With a sharp metal friction sound, the iron door slowly opened to Scene. Scene stepped into the somewhat dark and damp cell. There were 2 lights on the grey mottled walls. There were still some black spots on the concrete floor under his feet, emitting a disgusting smell. On the right side of the prison was a somewhat damaged operating chair, with dark red blood and black stains on it. Obviously, it was not used for medical treatment but for torture. Various props for forced confession were hung in the air on the left side of the room. Charles lowered his head and sat quietly in his wheelchair, motionless, and seemed to be still in a coma. His hands were tied tightly to the armrests of the wheelchair by 2 specially made wide leather belts, unable to break free. On his head, there was a strange device emitting a faint blue light. No one knew what its specific purpose was. Opposite Charles, there was also a man slumped in a wheelchair. He was wearing a white hospital gown. Part of his hair was shaved off, and several centipede-like surgical scars were twisted on his exposed scalp. Ever since Scene entered the room, the patient had been staring at him straight, never moving away. Don't try again, you can't control me. Scene looked at Jason's heterochromatic eyes. He had been feeling a spiritual force constantly attacking him. You are so cruel. You are so cruel even to your own son. Scene had a look of contempt on his face. He said this to William Stricker. The old man followed Scene step by step and walked into the room together facing Scene's contempt. William Stricker just smiled coldly, and his eyes did not fall on Jason at all, as if he was not his flesh and blood at all. He just sneered and said indifferently, "Heh, my son is no longer in the world. Since the moment his mother died, he died with her in my heart. Now here is only mutant number 143. To me, he is just a useful tool." Hearing William Stricker's address to Jason, Scene turned his head and looked at Jason, who was still constantly impacting his mind. Due to the long-term torture of William Stricker's inhumane experiments, Jason has lost the physical functions and conscious thinking that a normal human should have. At this moment, he relies on the life-sustaining machine behind the wheelchair to survive. In that case, then I will help you. It is not known whether Scene said this to William Stricker or to Jason in front of him. Scene summoned a 3-pointed double-edged sword, raised his hand, and cut off Jason's head cleanly. Before William Stricker had time to speak, he saw Scene take out such a large and strange-shaped giant sword out of thin air. He didn't care about what he should do after Jason died. Now his eyes were full of surprise and confusion about Scene. With a dull sound of falling to the ground, Jason's head rolled onto the cold ground. After Scene killed Jason, Kin and the others also returned to normal. After noticing the movement in the prison, they rushed in. Seeing Jason's head on the ground and the big knife in Scene's hand, they naturally guessed what happened. Professor Kin and Aurora stood next to Charles on the left and right, checking his condition. Logan ran towards William Stricker angrily. "What did you do to the professor?" Logan grabbed William Stricker's collar with both hands and pushed his fat body against the wall. Under Logan's power, William Stricker's feet gradually left the ground. He used his hands to pull Logan's arms and struggled hard while looking at the iron door of the prison. There stood a grey figure with a confused face at the iron door. It was Yuriko, who had just used adamantium to penetrate Logan. Her expression at this time was not like a robot at all. She looked at everything that happened in the prison in confusion and helplessness, as well as her hands that were still stained with blood. Logan naturally noticed William Stricker's eyes. While suppressing William Stricker, he turned his head and looked at Yuriko at the door vigilantly, fearing that she would rush over to rescue William Stricker again. Logan. Just when Logan was about to kill William Stricker first, Charles finally woke up. Hearing Charles' voice, Logan suppressed his anger and let go of William Stricker, who was about to suffocate. "Ah, you okay, Professor?" The 3 of them were concerned about Charles, who had just woken up. After Aurora removed the abnormal headband on Charles' head, Charles felt that his mental ability, which had been blocked, had recovered. In an instant, he understood what had happened. Seeing Jason's head on the ground, he sighed. Actually, he is also very pitiful. Charles looked at Scene and said, "Of course he knew that it was Scene who did it, so I chose to let him be free. Are you going to let him be a zombie for the rest of his life?" Scene was a little disdainful of Charles' attitude. "William, that's your biological son. How can you Charles changed his target again. Heh. William Stricker just sneered and didn't say anything. He knew that Charles was no longer restrained by the special headband and could easily read what he was thinking. Alas, seeing Charles's compassionate look, William Stricker was very disdainful. He always thought that Charles was hypocritical, but he had to say that after Charles woke up. He was not worried about his life safety point with Charles's obstruction. William Stricker thought that these people would never attack him again point, but he still missed one person point. Swoosh. The three-pointed double-edged knife gently crossed William Stricker's fat neck, and his head fell to the ground with an unbelievable look, making a dull sound. William Stricker never understood until his death that these people were not following Charles. Why did Scene attack him like this? Seeing such a bloody scene, neither Kin nor Aurora showed any discomfort point, especially Kin. There was even a hint of excitement in her eyes. If someone looked closely at this time, they could see a flash of light in her eyes. It was as if something was quietly awakening. Chapter 98. Wanda and Pietro. Among the people present, only Scene keenly captured the fleeting mysterious energy fluctuations, which were as short as a meteor across the night sky. He turned his head suddenly to look at Jane beside him, but Jane's face was calm at the moment, and there was no abnormality at all. At the same time, Charles witnessed Scene's killing again, and he couldn't help but feel an urge to dissuade him. But then he thought that Scene was neither his student nor his follower, and he couldn't control Scene at all. So, the words that were about to come out of his mouth were swallowed back into his stomach, turning into a helpless sigh. Then, with the concerted efforts of Logan, Jane and Aurora, the mutants who had been imprisoned for a long time in the entire base, broke free from their cages and saw the light of day again. Most of these mutants were forcibly captured by the ruthless William Stricker, and they had been in the painful abyss of losing their freedom and dignity for a long time, and had to accept William Stricker's inhumane human experiments from time to time. Now that these mutants have regained their freedom, they are like birds out of cages, and trapped beasts out of shackles. How can they be willing to be restrained at all? Therefore, most mutants choose to turn around and leave without hesitation, without looking back, and disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. Faced with such a situation, Charles, who has always been kind and benevolent, has no way to force them. After all, everyone has the right to decide their own life path. Even if he has the ability to control other people's minds, he does not want to force them to stay against their will. However, just as the crowd dispersed like a tide, Scene unexpectedly noticed two different figures in sharp contrast to the actions of other adult mutants who couldn't wait to escape from this place. These two little guys did not leave in a hurry like others, but stood there at a loss, their eyes full of confusion and bewilderment, as if they were lost in this strange world, and they didn't know where to go. Charles obviously also noticed the confusion of the two little guys, and what surprised him even more was that his mental ability could not enter the heart of one of them. Why don't you leave? Charles maneuvered the wheelchair to the two little guys. Although Charles looked friendly and kind, the shorter one stood in front of him alertly to protect the taller one. Seeing that the two did not answer his words, Charles did not show any dissatisfaction. He was very patient. He knew that the two little guys had been deceived and humiliated too much, and were caught by people like William Stricker in such a place, so he was wary of everything. I won't hurt you. If you need help, you can tell me. Charles continued to release his kindness. If you have nowhere to go, his mutant school is indeed a good choice. Although this person is a bit long-winded, he is at least a good person. Scene also walked up to the two little guys and gave Charles a good person card. The short one was obviously moved, but the tall one kept staring at Scene. I want to know who you are. The short one finally spoke, and he looked at Charles and asked, I'm Charles Xavier, a mutant like you. I have an academy that takes in mutant children who have nowhere to go and teaches them how to use their mutant abilities correctly. Jane and Aurora, who saved you, were my students. Now they volunteer to stay in the academy as teachers. When it comes to Xavier's School for Geniuses, Charles always feels that this is the most correct thing he has done, so he is very proud. Aurora and Jane also came forward to introduce themselves to the two little guys. Obviously, the affinity of women is very useful at this time. I'm Pietro, and this is my sister Wanda. Pietro was obviously a little defeated by the offensive of Jane and Aurora, two intimate sisters. I'm the sister, and you are the brother. Wanda looked at Pietro and retorted, and at the same time couldn't help but secretly glanced at Scene Point, noticing Wanda's eyes. Jane felt a little helpless and a little funny. Why are these little guys so interested in Scene? This is Logan, a mutant like us. But he is not a member of the academy yet. That's Scene. He is not a mutant, but he is also a good man, and he has very strong strength. If it weren't for him this time, it would not be so easy for us to save you. Jane introduced the two little guys one by one, and also gave Scene a good guy card. Point Scene. I didn't say I was a good person. Pietro was obviously a little wary when he heard that Scene was not a mutant. It seems that the two of them had not had a good experience before. Compared with Scene, he prefers the cool looking Logan. Wanda also had some emotional fluctuations when she heard that Scene was not a mutant, but she quickly disappeared after hearing that Scene was the main reason for their rescue. Is he also a teacher in your academy? Wanda wanted to point her finger at Scene, but she took it back. Jane smiled and shook her head. Have you decided? Charles continued to ask when he saw that the few people had almost finished talking. Perhaps because he felt that this was too urgent, he immediately changed the subject and suggested, if you feel that you can't make a decision for the time being, you can go to the academy to stay and see. When you make a decision, even if you choose to leave, we will not stop you. Pietro looked at Wanda and asked for her opinion. The two little guys were obviously one. Even if one of them wanted to go very much, if the other said no, then they would definitely leave together. Wanda saw that Pietro was moved, and to be honest, she was also a little moved. These people in front of them could release the two of them from here. If they really had any bad intentions, they would not have to work so hard. What's more, they also saw that those who were imprisoned with them just now chose to leave, and these people did not stop them. So after the two little guys discussed for a while, they decided to go to Xavier's School for Geniuses first. At this time, Natasha also brought a group of people to Lake Ackley. Logan looked nervously at the group of black-clad men who suddenly appeared. He didn't know whether they were friends or enemies. Jane and Aurora were also alert. After all, this was William Stricker's lair. Is everything settled? Natasha, who was wearing a tight black agent uniform, asked. Well, sort of. Now the only thing missing is Magneto, who is still in prison. Scene replied. Hearing Scene's voice, the others looked at him. They didn't expect Natasha to know Scene. I came here specifically to bring you a message. Natasha looked at Charles and others. Not long ago, Magneto escaped from prison. Chapter 99. Is something missing? Scene and Charles were not surprised to hear the news that Magneto had escaped from prison. Magneto was a man of appearances, and a prison was not enough to hold him. Let's talk about it next time we meet. Scene waved his hand indifferently, then turned to look at Charles. I think you already know William Stricker's purpose and what I did in your academy. Charles nodded after hearing Scene's words. Since that thing is destroyed, don't rebuild it again. Scene continued, but Charles thought that as long as the brainwave enhancer was protected, it would be fine. Moreover, this device was only available to him. Charles was very confident in himself. He never thought of using the brainwave enhancer to hurt anyone, whether it was human or mutant. He just used the brainwave enhancer as a tool to find similar people. So he thought the brainwave enhancer was safe in his hands. Doesn't Charles understand the principle of being guilty of holding a treasure? No, he understood it very well, but he still wanted to rebuild the brainwave enhancer. When Scene saw Charles wanted to refute, his brows furrowed tightly, and his eyes shot straight at him like two cold lights. At this moment, an invisible pressure emanated from Scene, sweeping around like a surging wave. Everyone present couldn't help but tremble in their hearts, as if a giant hand had strangled their throats, and their breathing became rapid. They looked at each other with astonishment and panic on their faces. Obviously, they didn't expect Scene to suddenly burst out with such a strong aura. And Kin was even more puzzled. She couldn't figure out why Scene suddenly changed his face, and the atmosphere that was just fine dropped to freezing point in an instant. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, can't we talk calmly? It has to be like this, okay? I promise you. Charles saw Scene's eyes and felt the pressure like a huge wave. He didn't doubt that, if he didn't agree, Scene would give him a knife directly, like he did to Jason and William Stricker. Seeing Charles' compromise, Scene nodded, and everyone present felt relieved. Natasha walked to Scene's side and asked him with her eyes. Scene shook his head and said nothing. The old guy was a little ungrateful. And this sudden scene made Pietro have a new view of Scene. So cool. One person can suppress everyone. The teenage boy was in the blood, and his eyes were about to burst into stars when he looked at Scene. Perhaps he felt that the atmosphere was a little awkward, and Logan said, "Do you feel that something is missing?" As soon as this was said, everyone looked over with confusion. Logan said helplessly, "Has anyone found out where Scott is?" Oh my god. After Logan's reminder, Kin and Aurora remembered their good companion. Kin was stunned. She had completely forgotten that there was such a person. She didn't know what Scott would think if he knew that he had no status in his girlfriend's heart. With the help of Charles's mental power, they found Scott, who was imprisoned. "Professor, are you okay?" Scott asked Charles if he was safe as soon as he was rescued. After all, he was caught because he failed to protect him. "I'm fine, Scott." Charles' mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a smile, but that smile hid the reluctance that others could not see. He was quite satisfied with Scott in the past, thinking that this young man had outstanding abilities and potential. However, after this incident, everything became different. Charles understood that this crisis could have been completely avoided. And it was Scott's jealousy and complacency that caused this situation. Because Scott blindly distrusted the key information provided by Scene, the two of them were eventually imprisoned, and even almost put the entire academy and the entire mutant community into an irretrievable situation. If Scene had not stepped forward, William Stricker would have gotten the brainwave enhancer as he wished at this moment. If this is true, then Charles Xavier will surely become the eternal sinner in the mutant community. Thinking of this, Charles felt a deep fear and self-blame in his heart. As his thoughts flowed, Charles gradually let go of Scene's previous attempt to stop him from rebuilding the brainwave enhancer. Not only that, when he looked at Scene again at this moment, he only felt that he was getting more and more pleasing to the eye. Alas, it's such a pity. If Scene is also a mutant and can lead everyone forward, how great it would be. Perhaps this will avoid many unnecessary disputes and dangers. I think we still have to communicate with the president. Charles was in a trance for a while and reorganized his thoughts and said, "That's not necessary. We will be responsible for reporting the incident to His Excellency the President. Don't worry." Natasha replied. Charles saw from Natasha's aura and the men in black who followed her that Natasha had an official background, but he was still a little worried. "Don't worry that the authorities will target you, as long as you mutants don't cause trouble." Natasha saw what Charles was thinking, but, "Eric." Charles wanted to say something. "That's not your concern." Natasha's tone was a little impolite this time. This old guy really didn't know what was good for him. Charles sighed when he saw Natasha's attitude. Scott was a little upset to see his most admired professor being criticized, but he was not stupid. He also saw Natasha's official background, so he could only say to Charles, "Let's go back to the academy first, Professor." "Well." Charles glanced at Scott, then turned to Wanda and Pietro, and smiled and said, "Then let's go." Pietro was a little curious about the Xavier School of Geniuses they just talked about when they talked before, and now he can finally go and see it in person. But Wanda seemed a little stunned. She stood there looking at Scene motionlessly and didn't even respond to Charles' question. Charles thought Wanda was frightened by Scene's sudden change just now. "Don't take what just happened too seriously. We just had some disagreements on something." Charles tried to comfort Wanda. Wanda's lips moved slightly, as if she wanted to say something. Scene also noticed the abnormality of this little guy. He looked at Wanda's slender body, her stained clothes and her messy hair. Now she really couldn't see the future appearance of the Scarlet Witch at all. "Do you have anything to say?" Chapter 100. Am I that kind of person? Wanda mustered up all her courage, but unfortunately her voice was still so weak. Can we follow you, sir?" Scene was also a little surprised when he heard Wanda's words and tilted his head to look at her. The little girl has good taste. Pietro did not express any opposition to what Wanda said. After all, the hand that scene showed just now had conquered the little boy. Charles could not see through Wanda's mind, so he did not expect Wanda to say this suddenly. He turned his head and looked at scene. Scene tilted his head and thought for a while. Owning a little witch? It seems that it is not impossible. It can be. Before Scene finished speaking, Natasha narrowed her beautiful big eyes and looked at him. What? Exclamation mark. Now even such a small one is not spared? Feeling Natasha's strange eyes, Scene rolled his eyes at her unhappily. Scene, am I that kind of person? Natasha, remove the word mahou. About this, Scene. If both of you are willing, you can adopt the two little guys, and then they will go to Xavier School for the Gifted. What do you think? Charles suggested. Charles was also very upset. He finally recruited 2 students, and the rice was cooked, but the rice cooker was about to run away. Hearing the word adopt, Natasha nodded. I think it's okay. In fact, she also sympathized with the 2 little guys. What's okay? I'm not much older than them. How can I adopt them? Scene didn't want to be a father for no reason. Open up a little bit. You can be a brother and sister. Hearing Natasha say this, Scene looked at Wanda and Pietro, intending to ask for their opinions. Pietro also felt a little awkward when he heard about adoption. Although they were orphans, they had parents before, but later he heard that the beautiful sister said that they were brothers and sisters, so he didn't have any psychological burden. Wanda's dirty little face didn't show much expression, but her big eyes were obviously looking forward to it. Then, is it settled? Scene asked Wanda and Pietro. Wanda's little head immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Then, I'll leave the formalities to you, Scene instructed Natasha, who in return rolled her eyes. Natasha, is it yours? After the few people had discussed it, Scene then opened the portal in front of everyone, which surprised Wanda and Pietro again. Scene and Charles and his group agreed to send Wanda and Pietro to their homes. After saying goodbye, he glanced at Kin, who was also looking at him, and then took the 2 little guys into the portal that led directly to his home. After crossing the somewhat magical portal, Pietro looked at Scene's home curiously. The simple decoration style was in full view. Although it was dark now, he could still feel the faint smell of sunshine. Looking at the neat furniture environment in front of her, Wanda lowered her head to look at her and Pietro's dirty clothes and shoes, and was a little worried that Scene would be unhappy about it. The bathroom is over there, Pietro. Go wash first. I'll find you 2 of my clothes. As for Wanda, although Natasha and May sometimes come to his place, there are really no girls' clothes in his house. I can do anything, Wanda said anxiously in a low voice. Natasha went back to S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise she could take her away directly. Scene turned his head and glanced at the door. It was already late at night, and May was asleep, so he didn't wake her up. Then, you can use the bathroom in my room. I'll find you a set of clothes first, and when Natasha comes back, let her take you 2 to buy them. Pietro went to take a shower obediently, and Wanda followed Scene into the room step by step. Scene rummaged through the closet, found 2 sets of sportswear, handed them to Wanda, and then closed the door and went out. After arranging the 2 little guys, Scene sat on the sofa and poured himself a drink and began to recall the fleeting energy he felt from Jane today. That was definitely not an illusion. So did the Phoenix Force awaken, but why did it only appear for a moment? But how did this thing awaken? Why was there no sign? Scene suddenly thought of Jason. It seems that the Phoenix Force in Jane's body awakened because of Jason's illusion. Not knowing what effect this would have on Jane, Scene shook his head and sipped the wine in the glass. Sir, hearing the subtle sound coming from behind, Scene turned his head and looked at Wanda in confusion. What's the matter? Washed so quickly? Pietro is still in the bathroom. Looking at Wanda, whose hair was still a little wet, Scene said, don't call me like that. It sounds too weird. You can just call me by my name. Wanda always felt that calling her by her name was not very respectful to Scene. Because there were only 2 rooms, Scene arranged Wanda in his room, Pietro in the guest room, and he slept on the sofa. It didn't matter to him whether he slept or not. But Wanda objected, and she insisted on sleeping on the sofa. However, Scene pushed the little girl into the room directly and then reminded her to remember to blow dry her hair before going to bed. Wanda stood at the door in a daze, looking at Scene's equally simple bedroom. She felt a stronger warmth than outside, just like being illuminated by the sun. The next morning, May saw two people suddenly walk out of Scene's house with a look of shock on their faces. Backquote, just as May was about to ask, she saw Scene following behind her. Morning, May. Morning, Scene. What's this? Looking at May's curious eyes, Scene held a small head in each hand. These are my two brothers and sisters, Pietro and Wanda. Wanda's no longer dirty little face was covered with a layer of light pink, and Pietro also looked a little restrained. Then Scene briefly introduced May to Pietro and Wanda, but he saw that the two little guys were still a little uncomfortable. May, when did you have brothers and sisters? Why didn't I know? I'll explain it to you later. I'll take them shopping first, Scene said, looking at May's puzzled eyes. Then the three of them left the apartment with May looking confused. Scene was originally going to leave this job to Natasha, but who knew that this girl actually said that the matter at S.H.I.E.L.D. had not been dealt with yet, so Scene had to do it himself. After just a while of shopping with Pietro and Wanda, Scene felt that he had never been so tired in his life. It seems that even if he became Superman, he still doesn't like shopping. Fortunately, Wanda is very sensible. Although Pietro still feels a little unsatisfied under Wanda's eyes, he can only be honest. The two only bought some necessities and clothes and did not continue to ask to shop. Then Scene drove them to Xavier School for the Gifted. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.